Chapter 1569. However, he did not expect the Great Ming Dynasty to be so courageous. It could also be said that the two emperors of the Great Ming Dynasty were people who would not shed tears until they saw the coffin. They were not frightened by the strength of the five-star army and even wanted to struggle. Since that was the case, Yang Chendong would not go easy on them. Taking care of the three provincial kings first was to make an example out of them. No matter what, Zhu Huiqiu was still a descendant of the Zhu family. Although he killed his brother, it did not change the fact that he was a member of the Zhu family. Yang Chendong only hoped that after taking care of Zhu Huiqiu with an iron fist, Zhu Qizhen and Zhu Qiu could see the difference between them and finally surrender peacefully. Looking at the bright moon, Yang Chendong stood with his hands behind his back. His whole person was enveloped by the moon. The three provincial armies' attack was still ongoing. They had the idea of using manpower to consume firearms and ammunition. Wave after wave of attacks did not stop. Ba Daojiang's team had already been replaced. After repelling 4 waves of enemy attacks, the soldiers were very tired. Firing guns for a long time was also a physical activity. It was normal for their arms to be numb and their hands to be weak. At 2 o'clock in the morning, Dao Xiao brought another 100 black cavalry to replace them. When dawn broke, the attack of the three provincial armies finally came to an end. The entire courtyard was filled with corpses, and there was even a tall pile of corpses. The stench was so strong that it could be smelled from miles away. It was really nauseating. Outside the courtyard, Wang Zhanjiang was pinching his nose as he ordered the soldiers to clean up the battlefield. Below the courtyard wall, countless corpses were piled up. They were all the soldiers of the three provincial armies who had died last night. Looking at the corpses, Wang Zhanjiang's face was bitter. His legs were a little numb. In just one night, out of the 15,000 soldiers from the three provinces, more than 12,000 of them had died. This was because he had intentionally slowed down his attack speed in the later stages of the battle. Otherwise, he was afraid that not a single one of the remaining 2,000 or so people would have survived. 15,000 against 500. With a ratio of 30 to 1, Wang Zhanjiang's side actually lost 5/6 of their soldiers. Not to mention that Wang Zhanjiang had never fought such a war before, he had never even heard of it. He did not know how to face Zhu Huiqiu and explain to the king. Clean up the battlefield. Make sure to clean up the corpses. At the same time, stay far away from the courtyard. Give the enemy enough time to clean up the battlefield. After giving this order to the soldiers below, Wang Zhanjiang urged his horse to head towards the three provinces. Not long after Wang Zhanjiang left, a raging fire also ignited in the small courtyard. The number of soldiers in the black cavalry was limited. Naturally, they could not bury all the enemy corpses that had charged into their ranks. Considering that the weather was starting to heat up, they were afraid that the corpses would attract a plague. After reporting to Yang Chendong, the soldiers used a large fire to solve the problem. They burned all the enemy corpses with cremation. The smell of the burning corpses was quite unpleasant. When a breeze blew, the air in the entire southern cloud manor changed. Therefore, no matter whether it was near or far from the small courtyard, the people in the city all knew that someone had attacked the small courtyard where Bugnam of Gojoseon lived last night. Immediately, for their own safety, many people walked onto the streets and asked for help from the three provinces. Zhu Huiqiu had expected the people's actions. In the morning, he sent another general, Kai Wenju, to lead 5,000 soldiers to tightly seal off the main streets near the three provinces to prevent anyone from disturbing him. As for himself, he summoned Shen Tian, Meng Neng, Wu Yingtu, Moge, and General Wang Zhanjiang who had just arrived to report. His right-hand men all arrived. The servants of the manor served tea and snacks. Everyone sat together to discuss the next step. Just as everyone's attention was on Wang Zhanjiang's report, the servants left one by one. One of the stewards first went to the servants' room to say goodbye, saying that he was going out to buy some things. Then he walked out of the manor openly. This steward's name was Zhu Changjiu. He had been with Zhu Huiqiu for more than 10 years. He was definitely an old man. This could be seen from the fact that he was given the surname Zhu. He also enjoyed a certain amount of power in the manor. For someone like this, his every move would not be suspected. However, this Zhu Changjiu had actually been bribed by Yang San. Yes, bribed. In order to get in touch with this person, the intelligence department spent a lot of effort. Yang San specially appointed a group of 7 people to get in touch with this person and related matters. For the sake of confidentiality, this group of 7 people was directly led by Yang San. In the entire Xianxia, other than Yang San, only Yang Chendong knew about this matter. However, he only knew about the existence of this group. As for who the specific members were and who they were in contact with, Yang Chendong did not know. This operation could be said to have reached the highest level of security in order to prevent information from leaking out. In the situation of knowing that there was a traitor, but not knowing who it was, Yang Chendong could not completely trust anyone. It was such a small group that did a lot of work for Zhu Changjiu. They investigated everything related to this person's life. It was not easy to find out that before this person came to Zhu Huichen, he had a sister who was 3 years younger than him. At that time, because the family was hit by a flood, the two were separated during the escape. There was no news for a long time. When this news was seen by Bureau Chief Yang San, he felt that there was a lot to be done. At that moment, he put in a lot of effort and mobilized a lot of manpower and material resources to investigate this matter. His hard work paid off, and he really did manage to find out. Coincidentally, this woman was still alive, and she even came to Crimson City by accident. Now, she was already married, and she was a middle-level leader in the textile factory. After hearing this news, Yang San was overjoyed. He brought all the information and paintings about this woman, which was Wang Lin, to Yunnan Manor. Under the arrangement of the 7 small secret group, he met with Zhu Changjiu, this person whose original name should be Wang Cheng. When Zhu Changjiu was blocked by Yang San in an alley, he instinctively wanted to shout. Based on his familiarity with the surrounding environment, he knew that there was a street 30 steps behind him. There must be soldiers patrolling on the street. His shout was likely to attract their attention. Just when Zhu Changjiu wanted to shout, Yang San handed over the paintings in his hand. There were a total of 4 paintings. One of them was Wang Ling's current appearance, another was a painting of his parents together in his memory, another was a painting of her and her brother, who was Zhu Changjiu, playing by the river in front of the courtyard when they were young, and the last one was a painting of Zhu Changjiu before they separated. Wang Ling was now a middle-level leader in the textile factory. Her husband's family was an ordinary leader in the city lord's residence. She also gave birth to 3 cute children, and they were all studying in Yangxia school. It could be said that she had received a lot of favors from Yang Chendong. Now that there was something that needed her help, she would do her best to help. When the 4 paintings appeared in front of Zhu Changjiu, the door of his dusty memory was opened. For a moment he shut his mouth. Just like this, Zhu Changjiu, who didn't resist, had a long chat with Yang San in a secret and safe place. When he found out that his sister was living well and had given birth to 2 little nephews and a niece for him, Zhu Changjiu cried tears of joy. All these years, it wasn't that he didn't think of looking for his sister. This matter had even alarmed Zhu Huiyun. He had sent people to look for her, but there had been no news. Over time, everyone thought that this woman must have died and was no longer in this world. But happiness came so suddenly. Tell me, what do you need me to do? Zhu Changjiu was also a smart person. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been recognized by Zhu Huiyun. He looked at Yang San and asked in a deep voice. Outsiders didn't know what the 2 of them talked about. Anyway, after Zhu Changjiu left the house, he became Yang San's spy. His main task was to find out what other forces were secretly in contact with Zhu Huiyun other than the subordinates of the 3 provincial kings. Regarding this matter, Zhu Changjiu felt somewhat guilty. After all, Zhu Huiyun had treated him well. But when he thought of Yang San's promise that not only could his sister live a better life in Xichen City, but after the matter in Yunnan, he could also go to Xichen City to reunite with his sister. In the end, his emotions won over his rationality. Moreover, he only wanted to find that mysterious person, not to do anything to Zhu Huiyun. After thinking this through, Zhu Changjiu accepted this task. Today, he left the mansion to report to Yang San. This was the first time he saw Emogui in the main hall. Judging from everyone's reaction, this should be the person Yang San was talking about. In the past, Emogui had been hiding in the 3 provincial kings' mansions. Because he lived in a place where outsiders couldn't get close, Zhu Changjiu didn't know. Yang San spent a lot of effort but still couldn't get any news. But now, perhaps because Yang Chendong was surrounded in the courtyard, everyone thought that he couldn't escape. So, they didn't hide Emogui and let him come out to meet everyone. Even so, if it weren't for the spies in the king's mansion, it would be impossible to find out about this person's appearance. In the king's mansion, Zhu Huiyun didn't know that Emogui had been exposed. He was listening to Wang Zhanjiang's report of last night's battle. When they heard that after a night of fighting, after launching more than 10 attacks and losing more than 12,000 men, they still couldn't break through the defense line set up by the Black Cavalry Dragon Guards, everyone present fell silent. Obviously, the reality was different from what they had expected. The Black Cavalry Dragon Guards were not as limited as they had imagined. On the contrary, they should have had plenty of gunpowder. Chapter 1570. As for how the Black Cavalry did this, it was a mystery that everyone couldn't figure out. The most important question now wasn't to find the answer, but what to do next. Although the transmission of information was too slow and it was impossible to know if the news had already spread, from the information provided by Emogui, Yang Chendong might have already made his move. That man had a telegraph. According to Emogui, that thing could transmit messages from thousands of miles away or even further away. Last night's attack had already made their position clear. That was, the negotiation was completely fake. Their real goal was to capture Yang Chendong alive. With Yang Chendong's intelligence, he probably already had his suspicions. Last night's attack proved everything. In that case, the 5-star army would most likely make their move. There wasn't much time left for the 3 provincial armies. Everyone at the meeting knew that if they fought head-on, they definitely wouldn't be a match for the 5-star army. This had been proven by countless countries and factions that had been destroyed. In that case, other than capturing Yang Chendong, they had no other choice. We must capture Yang Chendong. Zhu Huichen suddenly stood up with a ferocious expression. Then, as if he had made a decision, he spat out 4 words, regardless of life or death. Finally, Zhu Huichen didn't dare to wait any longer. If he couldn't capture Yang Chendong within the time limit, once the main force of the 5-star army arrived outside Yunnan Manor, he wouldn't have a chance to make his move. On the other hand, as long as Yang Chendong died, even if he didn't capture him alive, as long as he could leave Yunnan Manor before the main force of the 5-star army arrived, he would effectively avoid the first attack. Then, there would be internal strife in Yangxia. When they split apart, it would be time for him to make his move. Zhu Huichen finally made his final decision. This made Emogui, who was sitting on the side like a guest, feel joy in his heart. The task given to him by his master was to kill Yang Chendong, not to capture him alive. Unfortunately, Zhu Huichen didn't listen to him on this matter, so he could only watch from the side. Now that both sides had the same goal, he could do whatever he wanted. It should be time to do something. Emogui had just made up his mind when Zhu Huihua looked at him. Mr. Emo, I've decided to kill Yang Chendong. Shouldn't you do something? Of course. Emogui nodded with a smile. Congratulations, Your Highness. You've made the right decision. If you want to capture Yang Chendong alive, it is indeed somewhat difficult, but if you want to kill Wu Wang who is hiding in the small courtyard, it is not very difficult. What do you mean, Mr. Mo? Zhu Huichen asked expectantly. He already knew that Emogui's master wanted Yang Chendong dead, but he wanted to gain more benefits, so he didn't make up his mind. Now that they had the same idea, he believed that Emogui would do something to help him. Your Highness, my master has just sent a batch of cannons. They are in a workshop in the east of Yunnan Prefecture. I'll have to trouble General Wang to make a trip there. Emogui was still smiling as he told Zhu Huichen the answer he wanted. What did he mean by, just sent a batch of cannons? Only an idiot would believe that. Although the current Southern Cloud Manor wasn't heavily guarded, it would be harder than ascending to the heavens to send something as large as a cannon into the city without anyone's knowledge. This could only mean that the cannons were already in the city, but Emogui's master wasn't satisfied with Zhu Huichuan's idea, so he didn't reveal his trump card. Zhu Huichun quickly figured out the crux of the matter, but he still pretended to be happy and laughed. Good. Mr. Mo's cannons are just in time. General Wang, go to the east of the city immediately and move the cannons outside the courtyard. Tonight will be the night Yang Chendong dies. Sir. Wang Zhanjiang stood up with excitement on his face. He had been worried about what to do at night. Looking at the black cavalry, as long as they didn't lack ammunition, it would take a lot of soldiers to charge in. But with the cannons, things were different. With the cannons, they could ignore the enemy's firearms. The courtyard wasn't that big, so they could just bombard it. Then, he could eliminate the black cavalry without touching a single hair of the enemy. With a face full of joy, Wang Zhanjiang accepted the order and left. Not long after, he arrived at the workshop in the east of the city that Mo Gue mentioned. He found 10 cannons and 300 rounds of ammunition in the courtyard. Whether it was the number of cannons or the number of cannons, Wang Zhanjiang was overjoyed. They had wanted to stockpile cannons before, but the Southern Ming Empire had imposed a blockade on them, and the Five-Star Army didn't have any intention of selling cannons, so they could only wait. Now that they finally had the cannons, General Wang felt that his body was full of energy. The cannons were found and transported from the east of the city to Yang Chendong's courtyard in the west of the city. The news quickly reached Yang San's ears. The spies he had hidden in the 3 provinces' armies were finally useful. The news was also sent to Yang Chendong through the radio. 6th Young Master, urgent call. Telecommunications Director Wang Shan nervously sent the newly copied telegram to Yang Chendong. Don't panic, the sky won't collapse. Yang Chendong said confidently. He reached out and took the telegram. When he read the contents clearly, his eyebrows couldn't help but raise high. Then he fell into deep thought. There were no cannons in the 3 provinces' armies. The only ones that had been used to attack Beijiang Prefecture had all been blown up. This could be seen from the previous intelligence department and various reports. This was also one of the reasons why Yang Chendong dared to enter the city with only 500 black cavalry soldiers. However, the other party now had 30 cannons and 300 rounds of ammunition, which made the situation serious. This didn't mean that Yang Chendong was afraid of these artillery shells. These days, Beta Persei didn't participate in the battle and command the battle. Instead, he led the 300 black cavalry soldiers to continuously dig tunnels. Wasn't it to prevent such a thing from happening? Yang Chendong was now thinking about the source of these cannons. Yang San had made it very clear in the telegram that these cannons were not the field cannons of the Five-Star Army, but the red coat cannons created by the Southern Ming Dynasty. In recent years, due to the emergence of the Five-Star Army's firearms, both Baiming and the Southern Ming Dynasty had been forced to invest a lot of resources in the research of cannons. Now, they both had a large number of cannons, but due to the lack of technology, most of these cannons were solid shells, and the range was very limited. Not to mention the power of the cannons, or whether Yang Chendong had prepared for it, the source of these cannons alone was enough to make one ponder over it carefully. Did the Southern Ming Dynasty support the 3 provinces' armies to kill him? Or did the traitor help Zhu Huiming get them? If it was the former, it would be fine. After dealing with the 3 provinces' armies, he could use this as an excuse to start a war with the Southern Ming Dynasty. However, if it was the latter, then the identity of the traitor was somewhat interesting. The traitor understood the situation in the Xianxia dynasty very well, could speak with the Southern Ming Dynasty, and could even obtain such an important weapon like the cannons. Who could this traitor be? For some reason, with the appearance of these cannons, Yang Chendong had a feeling that he could confirm the identity of the traitor one step closer. He could see who in the Xianxia dynasty had contact with the Southern Ming Dynasty and then identify them one by one. The 30 cannons were pushed out of the small courtyard, and Wang Zhanjiang was only waiting for the sky to turn dark. In order to ensure the success of tonight's operation, Zhu Huiming gave another 10,000 soldiers to Wang Zhanjiang, which made him more confident. Zhu Huiming was also very nervous as he waited for the good news to arrive in the palace. While he was waiting, the sky turned dark as promised. When the curfew arrived and there were no civilians on the streets, Wang Zhanjiang impatiently went in front of the cannons and gave the order to fire. There was no prelude, no warning. The moment the cannons came, It was to give the 500 black cavalry in the small courtyard a head-on blow. The attack last night caused Wang Zhanjiang's losses to be too great. With this hatred, he was determined to uproot Bugnam of Gojoseon. Boom boom boom. Under the irregular cannon fire, the outer walls of the 4 courtyards and the 3 courtyards quickly collapsed. The solid metal cannons wreaked havoc in the small courtyards as if there was no one there. It was as if they were the boss and those who blocked them would die. Originally, the 3 provincial armies did not have any artillery units, and there was no real standard for how to use these cannons. As a result, the cannons that were fired could fly anywhere. This was also why the attack this time was so powerful. After a few waves of attack, the outer walls of the 2 courtyards collapsed. Many houses were also knocked down by the cannons, causing rumbling sounds of the walls collapsing. Smoke and dust rose into the sky. Even though it was the 15th day of the lunar calendar and the moonlight was very bright, people's vision was still very limited. Looking at this rather spectacular scene, Wang Zhanjiang's heart was filled with pride. He could not wait to see the scene of the Black Knight Dragon Guards being crushed by him. Without the help of firearms, his 10,000 men would only be able to deal with a few hundred Black Knight Dragon Guards. He was confident that he could achieve victory. Each cannon fired a total of 5 cannons, and half of the solid metal cannons were wasted just like that. It also cleared a wide enough space for attack. Wang Zhanjiang immediately stopped the cannons from firing. Then, with a loud shout, the infantry charged forward. Chapter 1571. If they hadn't received the news in advance, it would have been like last night. The Black Cavalry Dragon Guards would have set up a firepower net and blockade outside. In the face of this sudden solid bullet attack, they would have suffered heavy losses. It wasn't impossible for them to lose their defensive line tonight. However, after receiving the news a step earlier, everything was a different picture. Long before the sky turned dark, most of the Black Cavalry had already hidden in the tunnel that Beta Persei had dug. This kind of tunnel was similar to the bomb shelters of the future. Even if it was a burst of fire, it could block it, not to mention a solid bullet. It could not hurt the people hiding here at all. Most of the Black Cavalry were hiding. Only less than 50 Black Cavalry were sent outside. They hid in various houses and used the solid walls to observe the movements outside. This was also to prevent the enemy from launching an attack, so that they could be the first to stop them. It was worth mentioning that these Black Cavalry were no longer holding Type 95 in their hands. Instead, each of them had a rocket launcher. The rocket launcher could easily hit more than 100 steps away. It made them look like they were holding a small mobile cannon with great power. When the cannons of the 3 provincial armies began to fire, the 50 Black Knight Dragon Guards were hiding in the small houses. Although more than 100 solid shells were fired and caused some damage, there were no casualties among the 50 Black Knight Dragon Guards as they were covered by the strong walls. Only 2 of the soldiers were choked by the smoke and couldn't stop coughing. Then the assault of the 3 provinces began. The 50 of them immediately fired their rockets, and when the cannons landed in the midst of the enemy camp, the shockwaves from the explosion killed, injured, and scattered the black shadows. When the rocket launcher sounded outside, it was equivalent to giving the Black Cavalry hiding in the bomb shelter the order to charge and counterattack. Everyone came out of the tunnel in a line, each holding a Type 95 or a light machine gun. They found the predetermined position to counterattack and began to madly fire and counterattack. The sound of cannons and concentrated gunfire was constantly heard, giving the charging soldiers of the 3 provinces a head-on blow. Completely unprepared, they were caught off guard. Just the thousands of soldiers from the 3 provinces who were charging at the front were wiped out in a single exchange. Not a single one of them survived. The Black Cavalry's methods and enhanced firepower really frightened the soldiers of the 3 provinces. They could not help but stop in their tracks. Then, without waiting for orders, they frantically retreated. After a round of bombardment and a round of charge, they had suffered more than 1,000 casualties. When this result was reported to Wang Zhanjiang, it made him even angrier. His face also revealed a crazy expression. Boom! Continue to bombard them. Destroy all the houses. I want to see where they can hide. The wave of bombardment just now had already destroyed more than a third of the houses in the 2 courtyards. This allowed the soldiers of the 3 provinces to charge more than 10 steps without any threat. Wang Zhanjiang wanted to use the same method to continue to charge forward, slowly nibbling away the space for the black cavalry to survive, and finally gain the initiative of the battle. The cannons were pushed forward again. Each of the 30 cannons fired 2 shells, which meant 60 solid shells rolled in front of the houses. Without the obstruction of the courtyard walls, more than 10 houses were destroyed. This time, the black cavalry did not have a record of 0 casualties. 2 soldiers were injured, and 1 soldier's injury was not too light. Fire at the enemy's cannons, blow them up. Looking at the rocket launcher, Beta Persei roared in anger. The black cavalry were his good brothers, and Beta Persei knew every one of them by name. Now that his brothers were injured, as the actual commander of the black cavalry, how could he not be angry? The Black Knight Dragon Guards, who were also enraged, fired their rocket launchers. They had been waiting for this order. In an instant, several people rushed forward. Under the moonlight, they came within 80 steps of the 30 cannons. Then, they angrily fired their rockets and smashed into the cannons, causing a series of loud sounds of metal colliding. The sudden bombardment directly destroyed several cannons, and even some of the soldiers standing in front of the cannons were blasted into the air by the powerful explosion. When they fell to the ground, they were already dead. Good job, continue. Seeing that there was an effect, Beta Persei continued to shout excitedly. Several more rocket launchers were fired, and the cannons were destroyed one after another. Wang Zhanjiang saw all this, and it made his heart ache. He only had a total of 30 cannons. This was all he had, and it was also all the property of the king of the 3 provinces. If all these were wasted here, he was afraid that he would not be able to explain it to the king. Therefore, with a pained expression on his face, he ordered his men to continue to charge forward, looking for the black cavalry's gunner, and at the same time, distracting the enemy. Then he led his men to move the cannons back, saving the remaining 12 cannons and the 60 shells that were not destroyed. The black cavalry's full-scale counterattack was effective. They defeated the arrogance of the 3 provinces and took back some territory. But after all, it was a fact that so many houses were destroyed. After waiting for less than half an hour, the 3rd charge organized by Wang Zhanjiang began. When the soldiers of the 3 provinces came from all directions, the pressure on the black cavalry multiplied. When there were enemies on all sides, it was not as easy as before to block the enemy outside the position. The sound of the light and heavy machine guns was much more intense than last night. Beta Persei led the 200 black cavalry who were originally digging the tunnel to join the battle, and only then did they manage to stabilize the situation. Under the moonlight, the sparks from the bullets could be seen everywhere. The soldiers of the 3 provinces who rushed from all directions fell one after another, but then they rushed up one after another. At this point in the battle, human lives were the most worthless. At this time, everyone seemed to be red-eyed. Other than shooting, they were charging, and they looked like they would not stop until they fought to the death. Yang Chendong was also standing in the tunnel at this moment. Beside him, telecommunications director Wang Shan looked at him expectantly, waiting for orders at any time. But after waiting for a long time, seeing that Yang Chendong did not give any orders, Wang Shan could only look up and down again. As Wang Shan expected, Yang Chendong did indeed have a backup plan in Yunnan manner. Once he mobilized this force, it would be very powerful. But he did not do that, not for anything else, but because he felt that things had not reached the final juncture yet. Just like how he had a backup plan, he had a feeling that his opponent also had a backup plan that had yet to be used. He was waiting, planning before moving. The attack was still going on, and the number of deaths was constantly increasing. General Wang Zhanjiang's face was already covered in cold sweat. Originally, he thought that with the help of the artillery, tonight's attack would be as easy as crushing dry weeds and smashing rotten wood. Even if he could not capture Yang Chendong alive, he could still kill him. But who would have thought that the other party was clearly prepared? After fighting for nearly 3 hours, there were less than 5,000 soldiers left in his hands. At this rate, he was afraid that when dawn came, not only would he not achieve the expected victory, but he would also not have any soldiers to use. In the past, he had always heard about how powerful the five-star army was and how powerful their firearms were. But before he really saw it, he did not believe it in his heart. But after 2 consecutive nights of attack, he finally knew how powerful the opponent was. He also finally understood why so many forces and countries would be defeated and even destroyed when facing the five-star army. Would the 3 provincial armies be wiped out as well? Once this thought appeared in his mind, he could not get rid of it. Wang Zhanjiang's face only became more unsightly. In the prince's mansion, Zhu Huixing was still waiting for the good news in the main hall. However, after sending out wave after wave of people and obtaining the current situation, his expression could no longer be as calm as before. When the sky began to slowly brighten, and the sound of roosters crowing could be heard in the city, he fell into a chair with a thump. He knew that another opportunity had passed in front of him just like that. The sky was already bright, and there was no turning back. Zhu Huixing had no choice but to give the order to retreat. He believed that he still had a chance. Before he lost all hope, he did not want the people to see this scene and cause a revolt. If that happened, who knew what would happen? Early in the morning, the generals came to the 3 provincial princes' mansion again. As usual, Wang Zhanjiang, whose eyes were bloodshot, was the first to give the report. Wang Zhanjiang, who had not rested for 2 consecutive days, felt tired both physically and mentally. But in front of the king, he could only force himself to give a detailed report of last night's battle. When he said that the 30 cannons were all destroyed by the five-star army and that the soldiers suffered heavy losses in one night, the faces of the people in the meeting became very unsightly. The difference between reality and the plan was too big, so big that everyone could not accept it at the moment. Even though the gunshots rang out until dawn, everyone was mentally prepared for the attack to be unfavorable. But from Wang Zhanjiang's retelling, the result was worse than what they had expected. It seemed that the attack last night, other than destroying the outer walls of the 2 small courtyards and destroying some houses, did not hurt the black cavalry. Maybe they were hurt, but they did not see it, so they did not calculate it. Everyone comforted themselves in this way. When Zhu Huixing looked at everyone, he gave a different opinion. It's already been 2 days, we don't have much time left. Everyone, what should we do next? There were only 500 opponents, and they were right under his nose, heavily surrounded. However, he just couldn't eat them. This feeling made Zhu Huiyun very unhappy. When he looked at the crowd and spoke, his tone was filled with impatience. Chapter 1572. That's right, Zhu Huihua was anxious. This was because in the morning, when the sun had just risen, the scouts had entered the city and reported that the main force of the five-star army had begun to move towards the 3 provinces from Liang Mountain. The distance between Liang Mountain and Yunnan Manor was a few hundred li, but the news that came was that the cavalry of the five-star army was coming on horseback. Who knew if they would suddenly appear in front of him? If he couldn't get rid of Yang Chendong before these people arrived, then it would really be troublesome. This time, he had invited Yang Chendong to negotiate, but now he had to kill him. In terms of morality, he had already lost. If Yang Chendong didn't die, and the five-star army arrived outside the city, then the one who would die would be him. Time was of the essence, and Zhu Huihua didn't have the time to think about other things. Right now, what he needed to do was to kill Yang Chendong. Only then would Yang Xie be in chaos and he would be safe. Only then would he be able to obtain everything he wanted. Tonight, mobilize all the forces that can be mobilized. We must kill Yang Chendong. These words were squeezed out from between his teeth, and Zhu Huihua's expression became more and more ruthless. In this kind of game, where it was either you die or I live, anyone could only use all their strength. After Zhu Huihua made his final decision, the entire army of the 3 provinces in Yunnan Manor began to move. In order to achieve the goal of exhausting the firearms and ammunition of the Black Cavalry, even the 10,000 new recruits were put to use. However, because they didn't have any combat experience, in order to prevent a large number of people from escaping when the battle started, they weren't placed on the main attack. Instead, they were responsible for the security of the outer perimeter. For 2 consecutive nights, The entire Yunnan Manor's commoners probably knew that Zhu Huihua wanted to kill Yang Chendong. No one knew what these commoners would do. Although these people were often seen as ants, no one could deny that once these commoners took action, they would cause a huge commotion and cause serious consequences. In order to prevent the civilians in the city from doing anything that would be detrimental to their operations, the 10,000 new soldiers that had just been recruited were put to use. Their main purpose was to protect the civilians in the city and prevent them from suddenly causing trouble. Rather than calling them new recruits, it would be more accurate to call them able-bodied men. These people were all captured from various places. They didn't want to join the army at first, but they were unlucky and were captured at the last minute. Among them, there were more than 3,000 able-bodied men captured near Mount Liang. However, everyone knew that more than half of these 3,000 people were cold front warriors. Moreover, they were under the command of Cheng Hu, the elite 1st Regiment of the 1st Regiment of the Cold Front. Back then, Cheng Hu had split up the Cold Front warriors and disguised them as local refugees. Furthermore, they had pretended that they were coincidentally found by the army of the 3 provinces. Just like that, they were captured as able-bodied men. Not only did they successfully enter Yunnan Manor without any checks, they were also stationed in the barracks in the city. Logically speaking, the army of the 3 provinces had a set of methods to manage the army. For example, after entering the barracks, they had to go through household registration and so on. With this set of procedures, it would be difficult for the Cold Front warriors to hide their target. Coincidentally, before the army could do anything, Yang Chendong arrived. This instantly attracted everyone's attention, and no one cared about the new recruits anymore. They also helped Cheng Hu's troops cover for him and stayed in the army. In the past 2 days, the news of Zhu Huihua wanting to kill Yang Chendong had already spread throughout the army. To the ordinary soldiers, this was simply a fight between gods. They only needed to follow orders. The main goal of the Xianxia had always been to let the Han people live better lives and let them become the rulers of this world. However, to the soldiers of the 3 provinces who were not Xianxia soldiers, they did not have the opportunity to experience this kind of glory. On the contrary, they had been receiving military pay from Zhu Huihua, the king of the 3 provinces. Naturally, they had been paid to do something. However, as 10,000 new recruits, they had not even received a single cent of military pay. This was naturally because they had only been here for a short period of time. However, this gave Cheng Hu and the others an opportunity to instigate a rebellion. If they were dealing with veteran soldiers, Cheng Hu and the others would have to think twice before doing anything. However, they did not have to be so careful when dealing with a bunch of new recruits who had been captured under the same fate. They could do many things boldly. Over the past 2 days, Cheng Hu and the others had been trying to instigate a rebellion. However, to be on the safe side, they did not reveal their identities. Instead, they used the identity of someone who had suffered a similar fate to build a relationship with the new recruits. For something like a grievance gathering, no other army in the Yangxia had done better than the Lungfeng army. Within the Lungfeng army, the 1st Division had done the best. For example, during their usual training, they had an assessment on how to gain the support of more strangers in the shortest time possible to strengthen their own forces. All of this was now put to good use. Under Cheng Hu's persuasion, more than 8,000 of the 10,000 new recruits were convinced. These people's hearts were already moved, and they were filled with all kinds of desires to become a part of the Yang faction's people. Under the propaganda of Cheng Hu and the others, the slogan of saving Bugnam of Gojoseon and making a contribution to the Yangxia army quickly spread to the people. When they found out that their 10,000 new recruits were also participating in the battle tonight, but were only responsible for the security of the outer perimeter, Cheng Hu was so happy that he almost jumped up. This was really a case of someone sending a pillow when you were sleepy. They were just worrying about how to get out of the military camp, and now the opportunity was right in front of them. When Cheng Hu heard the news, he immediately sent someone to contact the secret agents of the security bureau in the city to ask for the next step of the plan. After 2 nights of continuous attacks, especially when the 3 provincial armies even used 30 cannons, the head of the security bureau, Yang San, who was in charge of everything in the city, felt his scalp go numb when he heard this. This method of luring the snake out of its hole and winning the hearts of the people was a good method. However, they should not have let the young master take the risk. For this reason, Yang San had objected to it, but it did not work. Since this was the case, he could only do his best to ensure Yang Chendong's safety. 2 nights had passed, and the 3rd night was about to arrive. Seeing that the 3 provincial armies would launch a new round of attacks in a few hours, Yang San had already made a decision in his heart. He was going to take action, and the only thing he could do was to instigate the people in Southern Cloud Prefecture to launch an attack. Although he did not know how many people would die in this way, as long as he could protect the young master, everything would be worth it. At this time, Cheng Hu sent someone to contact him using a special method. When he found out that the 1st Regiment of the 1st Division of the Lung Feng Division was in the city and had secretly joined the 3 provincial armies as a new recruit, Yang San's bloodshot eyes could not help but brighten up. He was so happy that he exclaimed, "The heavens are really helping me. The heavens are really helping me, Xianxia." After exclaiming, Yang San immediately ordered the secret agents of the intelligence department in the city to move out and spread rumors in the city. The main thing was that if something happened to Bugnam of Gojoseon in the city, the entire Yunnan prefecture would be razed to the ground. If that really happened, no one in the city would be spared. If they could take action to support Bugnam of Gojoseon, they would be meritorious subjects. Those who made great contributions would be rewarded with silver and land in the future. Although the current Great Ming Dynasty was far from being as strong as before, it still had a certain foundation. At the very least, the state of society had not reached a point of no return. There were still some honest officials and capable officials. If the Great Ming Dynasty was really on the verge of collapse, all they needed to do was to say that they would welcome Bugnam of Gojoseon into the city and the people in the city would be able to make use of them. In order to cooperate with the soldiers of the Lung Feng Division, Yang San had used up all his trump cards. However, Zhu Huiqi did not know about this. Perhaps he had never cared about the people in the first place. In addition, an even greater danger was pressing down on him. In the great general's residence in Guizhou, Jiang Wuqing was currently meeting with a guest in the study. As the great general of Guizhou appointed by Zhu Huiqi, Jiang Wuqing's strength was not weak. With 100,000 soldiers in his hands, he was confident. Even he himself was tall and strong, with a dignified appearance. Jiang Wuqing was a forthright person. From time to time, one could hear him laughing loudly. As a result, he enjoyed an illustrious reputation in Guizhou. However, today he could no longer laugh. This was because a familiar person had appeared in front of him. It was Yao Yingjun. As the Security Bureau's earliest spy and one of the most successful ones, Yao Yingjun was born with good looks. People called him Pan and the Reincarnation. Using this advantage, he successfully won the favor of Princess Yongxing, Zhu Lian. He was also able to transmit the situation here to the higher-ups of Xianxia. Everything came to an end after Zhu Huiying killed his brother. After Yao Yingjun received the information from the Security Bureau, he immediately took Princess Yongxing away. He quickly formed a group of people and had been roaming around Guizhou. At that time, Yao Yingjun could have brought Princess Yongxing back to Yangxia's territory. Based on the important information he had transmitted over the years, the rewards he received would be enough for him to use for the rest of his life. However, he did not do that. Instead, he continued to be with Princess Yongxing and raised the banner of opposing Zhu Huiqi. Needless to say, Yao Yingjun's act had become real. He had really fallen in love with this princess. Because of this, Yang Chendong also made a promise. No matter when, as long as he didn't want to work anymore and wanted to leave with Princess Yongxing, he would personally give them permission to find a safe place to live the life of a rich man. Chapter 1573. Those who had done intelligence work knew that it was easy to enter but difficult to leave. After doing intelligence work for a day, it would be difficult for someone who had spent their entire life in intelligence work to leave safely. As such, many people envied Yao Yingjun because of this matter. Feeling grateful for Yang Chendong's kindness, Yao Yingjun decided to do better work to repay his kindness. This time, taking the initiative to meet Jiang Wuqing was a risky move by Yao Yingjun to repay his kindness. When Zhu Huiyun was still alive, Yao Yingjun knew Jiang Wuqing, but they did not have much interaction at that time. As such, when he appeared alone in the Jiang residence, Jiang Wuqing was shocked. Considering that Bugnam of Gojosian had already entered the Yunnan residence, and now that Yao Yingjun had taken the initiative to appear in front of him, Jiang Wuqing instantly thought of many things. "Come in with me." Jiang Wuqing didn't immediately call for his bodyguards to arrest them. He spoke with a very calm tone. He believed that since the other party had come, it would be in his hands and could be seized at any time. Since that was the case, there was no need to be anxious. It would be better to see what he had to say. Yao Yingjun understood Jiang Wuqing's behavior very well. He had done a lot of homework and fully understood the nature of this Guizhou general, which was why he dared to take the risk alone. Hearing this greeting, he immediately chuckled, cupped his fists, and strode into the residence's inner room. The study was extremely quiet. As the host, Jiang Wuqing boldly sat down on the main seat and placed his sword on the table. His intention was self-evident. If Yao Yingjun could not convince him and give him a reasonable reason, he would probably use force. In response, Yao Yingjun only smiled and found a place to sit down. He then said, "General, do you know that a great disaster is imminent?" Jiang Wuqing's surprise at Yao Yingjun's shocking words disappeared in an instant. He then laughed coldly and said, "What? Is that all you have to say?" Negotiators from ancient times to modern times would often say shocking words in order to put enough pressure on the other party and fight for enough action. Jiang Wuqing had read a lot and had seen things like this before, so he wasn't surprised. Jiang Wuqing's performance fell into Yao Yingjun's eyes. He sighed in his heart at this person's calmness. Then he said, "General, this one is not speaking arrogantly, but this is the truth. Bugnam of Gojosian was wise and mighty. In just a dozen years, he had conquered and occupied several territories the size of the Great Ming Dynasty. He had more than 1,000,000 troops under his command, and more than 10 million people under his rule. Wherever Bugnam of Gojosian went, his enemies were either killed or beheaded. Even if he surrendered at the mere sight of the wind, in order to preserve his life, who could be his opponent?" When Jiang Wuqing heard the praises, he did not have any intention of objecting. All of this was the truth. It was placed right in front of them, and they had no choice but to accept it. On this point, even Jiang Wuqing had some admiration in his heart. After praising Yang Chendong, Yao Yingjun continued, "Today, my lord has come to Yunnan Manor. Presumably, I don't need to say more about what will happen next. General, you should know what will happen, right?" Faced with this question, Jiang Wuqing knew that he had to say something, so he said, "Brother Yao, you flatter me. As far as this general knows, my lord has already laid an inescapable net in Yunnan Manor, and Bugnam of Gojosian only brought 500 followers into the city. Now that 2 days have passed, I'm afraid that Bugnam of Gojosian is now under my lord's control." Jiang Wuqing only received the news that Yang Chendong had entered Yunnan Manor this morning. At that time, he was indeed shocked by Yang Chendong's spirit of risking his life alone, but at the same time, he was extremely impressed. Although Jiang Wuqing did not mention it to anyone else, he knew very well that this time, Yang Chendong appeared in Yunnan Manor and made such a risky move in order to save the people of the 3 provinces from the suffering of war. Unfortunately, Jiang Wuqing knew his master very well. This was a master who would kill his own brother without hesitation. Such a person only had interests in his eyes, so how could he be honest? He could not understand. If he could see this point, then the wise Bugnam of Gojosian should also be able to see it, but why did he still risk his life? Just as he was wondering in his heart, Yao Yingjun arrived. A sense of curiosity arose in his heart. He wanted to see what Yao Yingjun thought about this matter and what he had to say. How could Jiang Wuqing know that it was precisely because he had just received the news from Yunnan Manor that Yao Yingjun appeared in order to force the other party to make a statement at the first moment? After all, Jiang Wuqing was a very magnanimous person who treated the people well. He was considered a good official, so it was better to try to win over such a person if he could. When Yao Yingjun heard this, he threw his head back and laughed heartily. Just as Jiang Wuqing was confused and somewhat confused, he suddenly stopped and said, "What's wrong? General, Do you think that you can keep my master with the means of the 3 provincial kings? To be honest, since my master dared to enter Yunnan Manor, he naturally made all kinds of preparations. How could he be easily controlled by others? If he did not have such means, how could he have today's achievements? Jiang Wuqing still believed Yao Yingjuan's words from the bottom of his heart. He also did not believe that Yang Chendong, who had always been invincible, would take such a risk. However, he just could not think of any way to break out of this situation. Out of curiosity, he could not help but ask, "Oh? But what means does Bugnam of Gojoseon have?" Shaking his head, Yao Yingjun did not answer this question. In fact, he himself did not know what means Yang Chendong had left behind. If he did not know the reason, how could he solve other people's doubts? Yao Yingjun, who did not answer this question, only said, "General, just wait for the result." But then he mentioned the purpose of his visit, which was to persuade Jiang Wuqing to surrender. "General, since my master has come to Yunnan Manor, presumably there will be a result soon. And I can say with certainty that the final loser will be Zhu Huihua. Then, may I ask, once the 3 provincial kings are captured, what will the general do?" After saying these words, Yao Yingjun kept staring at Jiang Wuqing's eyes, as if he wanted to find the answer he wanted. What to do? This was what Jiang Wuqing needed to consider. The great Ming dynasty's system valued the civil and despised the military. It was destined that the social status of the military would not be too high. For example, if a scholar made a mistake, he would often be held high and let go lightly. This was because behind him were his schoolmates, fellow townsmen, peers, and colleagues. Even if he made a mistake one day and left a way out, they would all stand up and speak up. On the other hand, if a military general made a mistake, he would often be thrown into a bottomless abyss. It was even possible to go down to the 18 layers of hell. This was especially true for those civil officials. In order to suppress the status and development of military generals, they would spare no effort in using all their strength. This was also the reason why military generals received far less treatment and reputation compared to civil officials, even though they were both subjects. Jiang Wuqing was born a military general. In the past, he did not know how many military generals and ancestors were played in the palms of the civil officials, and even had their families destroyed. Among these people, some really did make mistakes, and some were directly wronged because they offended someone. And even if they really did make some mistakes, should they be punished? Also, should the families of these military generals be so heavily implicated? At best, they would be exiled and made into slaves. At worst, they would be killed. However, because the right to speak was in the hands of the civil officials, even if some military generals had different ideas, they could only endure it in their hearts. Therefore, even though they were both officials, a military general was much more cautious than a civil official. And now, Yao Yingjun was asking him what to do, which made it difficult for Jiang Wuqing. He was indeed promoted by Zhu Huihua. Before this, he was only a chiliarch. Now, he could command 50,000 soldiers and become the general of a province. With this kindness, he indeed had to thank Zhu Huihua. But of all things, Zhu Huihua should not have provoked Bugnam of Gojoseon. Who was that person? He was an existence that could easily destroy grassland wolves. How could their local army compare to such a person? Even if Bugnam of Gojoseon entered Yunnan Manor and something happened. But what about the other people in Xianxia? Would they take revenge? Moreover, he had already heard that Bugnam of Gojoseon had appointed a prince, which was his successor. Would they really collapse? Taking a step back, if Bugnam of Gojoseon's Xianxia collapsed, what good would it do to him? Based on the fact that he had once served Zhu Huihua, not only would Xianxia's people not forgive him, but the civil officials in the southern Ming dynasty would also not let him off easily. If he was lucky, he would be dismissed. If he was unlucky, then he and his family would die. Thinking of his 4 children, the youngest of whom was only 4 years old, how could Jiang Wuqing bear to see them die because of him? For some reason, Jiang Wuqing's heart was filled with a sense of desolation at this moment. When he thought that because of him, his family would be implicated and die, he felt a burst of anger in his chest that wanted to erupt. It made him feel a burst of air and his heart beat rapidly. Jiang Wuqing's heart could be said to be filled with complex feelings, And all of this fell clearly into Yao Yingjuan's eyes. He felt that things could be done, so he laughed and said, "General, I don't think I need to say more about your situation. This time, the 3 provincial kings want to be enemies with my master, so they are destined to have a miserable end. How could such an unwise person be worthy of you working your life for him? Why don't you turn back now?" Bugnam of Gojosian said that as long as General is willing to surrender, not only will he not make any mistakes, but he will also give you merit. Even if we are all Han, he will give you wealth and ensure the safety of General and your family. Chapter 1574. These words were just right, and they also touched Jiang Wuqing's heart, causing him to be moved. However, considering that he had once received Zhu Huelio's kindness, would it be too unjust to do so? Also, how trustworthy was Yao Yingjuan's words? Jiang Wuqing had already opened his mouth to agree, but he closed it tightly again. There was no such thing as betrayal in this world. The only reason there was no betrayal was because the bargaining chip was not high enough. Or perhaps the threat was not high enough. If Yao Yingjun had not found him before, Jiang Wuqing might have had a choice and could have chosen the right time. However, now that Yao Yingjun had found him, he could only make a choice. He could either agree or not. Could he not agree? No one was willing to surrender. However, how could Jiang Wuqing, with a mere 50,000 soldiers, stop the 5-star army's might? Furthermore, the 50,000 soldiers under him belonged to the local army. In the end, their combat strength was only average. With such an army, Jiang Wuqing had already lost the confidence to fight against the experienced 5-star army before the battle even started. Whether it was because he had seen the situation clearly or because his strength was not enough, Jiang Wuqing had no choice but to make a decision. He looked at Yao Yingjun and asked, "But I don't know, if I choose to surrender to the 5-star army, what kind of guarantee can I get?" Southern Cloud Manor. There were less than 2 hours left before the sky turned dark. A gloomy atmosphere shrouded the city, giving people a very oppressive feeling. For the past 2 days, the commotion at night was not small, especially last night. The sound of cannons and gunshots were so dense. Anyone who was not a fool would know what was going on. It must be said that the common people were the most honest group. As long as they could survive, they would not do anything excessive. For example, words like swallowing their anger and living an ignoble life were used by them. However, when something happened and threatened their lives, they would change into a different appearance and reveal their fangs. In other words, the mighty army of the East had awakened. Who was Bugnam of Gojosian? Needless to say, everyone in Southern Cloud Manor knew. There were even many people who yearned for the Yangxie's life and thought of ways to seek refuge there. Originally, Yang Chendong had a good foundation of the people. This time, Yang Chendong was willing to take the risk in order to not let the common people of the 3 provinces suffer from the chaos of war. At this moment, he had won the hearts of the people. This was the general trend that Yang Chendong needed. Now that the general situation had been set, but the 3 provincial kings still wanted to kill Wen and Wang, how could the common people in the city be willing to do so? This was no longer a matter of 2 kings fighting. If things went wrong, the common people in the city would be affected. If they still did not do anything, in the end, the city would be killed. Once such a terrible result appeared in the minds of the common people, who could remain calm? It was at this time that the spies sent by Yang San came into effect. They mixed in with the common people and talked about the powerful relationship. More and more common people felt the crisis. Finally, waves of common people in the city began to rush in the direction of the destroyed courtyard with all kinds of weapons in their hands. Southern Cloud Manor was a big city. Not to mention its history, just the fact that it was the place where the former Sheeping Mansion and the current mansion of the 3 provinces were located, it had attracted a lot of commoners. The number of commoners here had reached more than 500,000 people at one point. Due to the chaos of war, the proportion of adult men was not high. However, even if the ratio was 10-1, it was still possible to gather 50,000 people. Not to mention, when the matter concerned their own safety and life and death, it was not only the adult men who would stand up. Some of the older men and some of the younger women also stood up together in order to seek a way out. They formed a mighty team and slowly rushed to the courtyard where Yang Chendong was. The kings of the 3 provinces who were paying close attention to the situation in the city quickly reported the matter to Zhu Huihua. In this regard, the kings of the 3 provinces who already had a countermeasure ordered to send out 20,000 veterans and 10,000 newly recruited able-bodied men to guard the periphery. Once they found that the common people dared to attack the former, they would be killed without mercy. At the same time, Zhu Huihua also gave the last 15,000 soldiers he had left to Wang Zhanjiang. The mission he gave him was to take Yang Chendong's life tonight, no matter what the cost. This was a desperate move, and no one stopped him. Although this was the last resort, at this moment, there was no better way to do it. But what Zhu Huihua did not know was that just tonight, 2 other assassination teams had also started to take action. They were the men of sacrifice of the Mu family led by Mu Ong and the 100 ninjas led by Mo Ge. The men of sacrifice of the Mu family led by Mu Ong have been lurking in the city for several days, waiting for the right opportunity to take action. There was no doubt about it. Although the Mu family also looked down on Zhu Huihua and would take his life if there was a chance. But in the face of a more powerful opponent, Yang Chendong, they had no choice but to work together to deal with this big problem first. For this reason, Mu Ong has made up his mind to succeed or die trying. Fortunately, after 2 consecutive nights of attack, the outer courtyard of Yang Chendong's residence has been conquered, and the range of activity has been reduced a lot compared to before. Under such conditions, once the men of sacrifice of the Mu family rush to Yang Chendong's side, they still have a high chance to kill the target and complete the mission. Let's talk about the 100 ninjas led by Mo Ge. This is a force that no one knows about. Ninjas are best at hiding. In addition to Mo Ge's arrangements, no one noticed them, even Yang Chendong didn't know about their existence. What's more worth mentioning is that the leader of this group of ninjas is the special ninja who has been on Yang Chendong's death list. This special ninja, who should have died in the assassination of the Timur Empire's General Mandu Latu, has now come to Yunnan Mansion without anyone noticing. In the dark, he is like a poisonous snake. Once he sees the opportunity, he will decisively attack and release his powerful energy. These 2 dark forces, one left and one right, stared at the dilapidated small courtyard, waiting for the best opportunity to appear. In the small courtyard, Beta Persei, Dao Xiao, Ba Daojiang, and others were also doing the final inspection. Years of war made them feel as if dark clouds were looming over the city. Everyone knew that the enemy's attack tonight would only be more ferocious compared to the attack of the previous 2 nights. Fortunately, they have enough firearms and ammunition in their hands, which is their strongest confidence. During the day, they have already dug trenches to ensure that the soldiers can hide in them and kill all the enemies under the premise of enough self-protection. Beta Persei, leave a gap in the east. It was unknown when Yang Chendong had changed into the golden cloak. Although the sky was turning dark, it was still dazzling. Under the illumination of the remaining light, it emitted a myriad of rays of light, giving people the feeling that he was a god descending to the mortal world. Young Master, Beta Persei was surprised when he heard this. Once a gap is opened, it may give the enemy an opportunity to rush into the small courtyard. If that's the case, it will be too dangerous. Execute the order. Yang Chendong didn't explain too much. Of course, he knew what he was doing. This is indeed a little risky, but if he doesn't do this, how can he find the forces hidden in the dark? Moreover, with his Grandmaster-level skills and the large warehouse that he can use at any time, is there really nothing to be afraid of? Perhaps this is the boldness of the skillful. Not to mention, who doesn't have a backup plan? Since it was Yang Chendong's order, regardless of whether Beta Persei is willing or not, he can only carry it out in the end. A gap naturally appeared in the east. However, it is not obvious, at least not at a glance. This is exactly what Yang Chendong needs. If the gap is too obvious, isn't it the same as telling others that this is a trap? The reason why Yang Chendong chose to take the risk this time is to see if he can find the whereabouts of the traitor. If his defense is foolproof, how could the traitor appear? The Black Cavalry, who have long been prepared for a tough battle, checked the weapons in their hands for the last time. The telecommunications director, Wang Shan, also came to Yang Chendong's side and reported the contents of a few telegrams that he just received. Sixth young master, Yao Yingjun has persuaded Guizhou province General Jiang Wuqing and has now taken over their military power. He has also sent 20,000 troops from Guizhou province to Yunnan prefecture. Sixth young master, after a day and night of long-distance attacks, my main army is now less than 300 miles away from us. They are confident that they will arrive outside Yunnan prefecture before noon yesterday. Sixth young master, the intelligence department has sent news that Guangxi province General Bai Kuan is now in close contact with the southern Ming imperial court. It seems that there is a possibility of him being instigated at any time. Sixth young master, listening to the contents of the telegrams read out, Yang Chendong calmly looked ahead. He knew that after taking a big detour and eliminating the surrounding dangers one by one, he would finally have to face the southern Ming imperial court. Okay, got it. At this moment, Yang Chendong did not feel too much joy. After all, once the war broke out, the ones who would suffer would be the lowest class of Han people. It would not be like when they attacked other countries and factions, where they could do anything to achieve their goals. Wang Shan seemed to feel that Yang Chendong's mood was a little gloomy, so he quietly left after replying. On the other hand, Yang Er walked up in confusion and said loudly, "Young master, don't be anxious. With 500 Black Knight Dragon Guards around, no one will be able to rush up to you and hurt you." Chapter 1575. His originally gloomy mood disappeared without a trace because of Beta Persei's interruption. But it was also at this moment that Yang Chendong thought of telling Beta Persei a few words. Otherwise, with this person's character, he would definitely ruin his grand plan. Beta Persei, if the enemy rushes in from the east later, young master, I will take them out of here, and you just need to guard this place well. Don't worry about me, understand? Yang Chendong said with a serious look on his face. If it were any other subordinate, he would only need to give an order for the other party to carry it out. But facing Beta Persei, who was a straightforward person, some things had to be said more specifically. But Beta Persei wanted to get to the bottom of this, but fortunately he still knew his place and immediately shut his mouth. But this did not mean that he had given up. On the contrary, he said carefully, "Young master, isn't this too dangerous? Why don't you let Dao Xiao or Ba Dao Jiang lead the team? I'd better stay by your side." No need. In order to dispel Beta Persei's thoughts and not let him take the risk, Yang Chendong said in a very decisive tone, "It's not like you don't know young master's speed. You can't keep up with me. Okay, just follow orders." Beta Persei's face immediately fell when he heard that he couldn't keep up. In terms of skill and strength, the Yang faction could be considered to be full of talents. Yang Er was considered to be one of the top existences. There were very few people who could convince him to submit. Yang Chendong was an exception. The two of them had exchanged countless moves in private. In the past, they could deal with each other once or twice, but now, they could not even last one round against Beta Persei. This made Beta Persei angry and happy at the same time. He was angry because his skills were too weak. He should have been protecting the young master. However, most of the time, he had become an existence akin to a decoration. This made him, who boasted that he was strong enough to establish himself with his fists and feet, lose face. He was happy that the young master had such shocking skills. His safety was guaranteed, so he didn't have to worry so much. In terms of skill, he was indeed not on the same level as Yang Chendong. Although he was reluctant, Beta Persei still agreed. "Yes, young master, but you must be careful. Don't worry. I know what I'm doing." Yang Chendong also breathed a sigh of relief. He was really worried that Beta Persei would disregard his orders and follow him. If that was the case, he would not be able to say anything about Beta Persei's loyalty. Now that he was on his own, he didn't have to worry so much. As for his skills, perhaps it was because he had been reborn, or perhaps it was because he had Daikro with him. In short, whether it was his speed, strength, or reaction time, his body was indeed frighteningly high. In addition, the battlefield and killing techniques that he had learned in his previous life were there to assist him. Unless it was a close-range attack, as long as he had a little bit of time and opportunity to react, no one would be able to kill him. Because of this, he dared to take such a risk. It was also because of this that he dared to open an opening in the face of tens of thousands of enemies with only 500 black cavalry and set an exposed trap for the people who wanted to harm him. Not to mention, there was still the existence of the backup plan. Just now, Director Wang Shan had reported that the backup plan was in place and that they were prepared at any time. With this, now he just had to wait for the enemy to fall into the trap. Perhaps he could use this opportunity to find out the identity of the traitor. Yang Chendong was ready for battle and made all kinds of preparations. Outside the small courtyard, Wang Zhanjiang led nearly 20,000 troops and was ready to charge. They had already failed for 2 consecutive nights. They had sent out tens of thousands of soldiers and dozens of cannons, but they were still unable to do anything to an army of 500 surrounded. Even though the enemy had advanced firearms, Wang Zhanjiang was still not afraid. No matter how advanced the firearms were, they still needed to be controlled by people. He didn't believe that the enemy would be able to hold on for long under continuous attacks. As long as he had the chance to get close, the human wave tactic would be effective, and it would be time for him to reap the fruits of victory. Once he killed Bugnam of Gojoseon, his reputation would definitely soar. At that time, who would dare to look down on him? When that time came, he would be the #1 hero in the world. With this thought in mind, Wang Zhanjiang felt quite excited, and the tiredness that he had felt for the past few days seemed to have lessened. While he was looking forward to it, the sky finally darkened. Wang Zhanjiang, who couldn't wait any longer, ordered the attack to begin as soon as the sky darkened. Fire arrows flew out one after another and flew towards the surroundings of the small courtyard. In order to ensure that everyone's vision was not obstructed, Wang Zhanjiang changed his strategy of fighting in the dark 2 nights ago. He prepared countless fire arrows in advance in order to illuminate the surroundings and find the weak points of the Black Cavalry's defense to find the best path to attack. Thousands of fire arrows suddenly flew up and landed around the small courtyard. Under the connected fire, the small courtyard was illuminated as if it was daytime. The trenches dug in the small courtyard also appeared in Wang Zhanjiang's sight. Good strategy, huh? Wang Zhanjiang laughed excitedly as he instantly understood the Black Cavalry's strategy. During the day, the Black Cavalry used all kinds of methods to conceal themselves and only dug trenches. They only entered the trenches when it was dark. If they continued to attack in the dark, then even if they died in battle, no one would be able to figure out what method the Black Cavalry used. Now that the trenches were right in front of him, Wang Zhanjiang, who understood everything, had a better plan in mind. Men, prepare to light a fire and release smoke. Smoke attack was one of the most commonly used methods on the battlefield. In history, there were many records of victory through smoke attacks. However, because of the many limitations of this method of attack, although it was a good method, there were not many people who used it. But now, the Black Cavalry was surrounded within a certain range, so using smoke attacks was a good method. Under Wang Zhanjiang's order, the soldiers quickly carried dry firewood and lit it. Then, they continued to add wet firewood to the fire. Soon, smoke rose, and under the incessant fanning of the soldiers of the 3 provinces, the smoke began to blow towards the small courtyard. They're going to release smoke. With the help of the night vision device, Ba Daojiang, who was guarding the first line of defense, quickly discovered Wang Zhanjiang's intention. However, he did not panic. On the contrary, the corner of his mouth revealed a disdainful smile. At this moment, if Wang Zhanjiang could stand in front of him, he could not help but scold him for his stupidity. In front of long-range firearms, what was the effect of releasing smoke? Did they not know that all they needed to do was to land a shell on the pile of firewood to solve all the problems? Come on, where are the rocket launchers? Aim them at the pile of firewood and blow it up, Ba Daojiang said with a confident face. The rocket launchers beside him immediately got ready. Before the smoke could completely form, the rocket launchers were already fired at the small courtyard, raising the pile of firewood to the ground. Not only did the smoke not have any effect, but more than 10 people were killed or injured because of the rocket launcher. Wang Zhanjiang frowned. He was very curious about how the enemy could see his movements clearly when the sky was dark and the smoke was thick. Although it was the 16th day of the lunar calendar, The time when the moon was full, he shook his head. Shaking his head, he pushed the unhappiness in his heart to the bottom of his heart. Now was not the time to think about this. There was not much time left for him. If he could not take down Yang Chendong tonight, he was afraid that his head would be removed from his body. Men beat the drums, charge. Under the illumination of the moonlight, accompanied by the flames everywhere, the soldiers of the 3 provinces began their suicidal charge. Just like a few days ago, the black shadows were everywhere. The soldiers of the 3 provinces pressed forward with a fearless look. Under the supervision of Wang Zhanjiang, the soldiers reluctantly charged forward. Open fire. The 500 black cavalry soldiers were naturally not going to be polite. With a shout, Ba Daojiang, who was in charge of the first line of defense, gave the order to open fire. In fact, after 2 days of fighting, the number of black cavalry soldiers was less than 500. To be precise, 13 soldiers were injured to varying degrees and could no longer participate in the battle. They could only stay in the main courtyard with Yang Chendong. Even so, the 487 black cavalry soldiers were armed with all kinds of advanced firearms. They were like a piece of metal, preventing the soldiers of the 3 provinces from approaching from all directions. Dense gunshots rang out, and the black shadows fell one by one. This battle made everyone realize the importance of weapons. When the weapons were advanced to a certain extent, it was already impossible to make up for it with manpower. The gunshots continued, and the casualties of the 3 provinces continued to increase. When the news reached the ears of General Wang Zhanjiang, he was calm like an old monk and did not even frown. All of this was within his expectations. Although he did not understand where the black cavalry got the firearms and ammunition, he had no choice. In a battle of life and death, in order to give Zhu Huihua an explanation, even if he had to sacrifice all of his soldiers, so what? As long as he could get rid of Yang Chendong, all of this was worth it in his eyes. A general's success was built on thousands of bones. At this moment, there was a clear reflection of the cruelty of war. Wang Zhanjiang personally supervised the battle. If any soldier wanted to retreat out of fear, once discovered, they would be killed without mercy. In this kind of battle where they would die regardless of whether they rushed forward or retreated, the soldiers had no choice. After getting used to obeying orders, they could only hope that they would be lucky enough to break through the blockade of the black cavalry and rush into the small courtyard. The soldiers of the 3 provincial armies, who had no other choice, showed the madness that they should have when they only had one path left to charge. Although the number of dead and injured soldiers kept increasing, after paying a huge price, they finally got closer and closer to the defending Black Knight Dragon Guards. When they were within an arrow's range, all kinds of bows and arrows began to fly, and the pressure began to increase. Chapter 1576. What's going on? Beat them back. Don't let any arrows threaten us. More and more arrows rained down on the trenches. Some of the black cavalry soldiers had already been hit by arrows. Although none of them were killed, more than a dozen soldiers were injured. Some of them even had their arms injured. This made it impossible for them to continue using their firearms in a short period of time. As Ba Daojiang shouted, a look of indignation appeared on his face. However, he didn't have a better idea. Tonight, the soldiers of the 3 provinces were rushing over without regard for their lives. Although the firearms in their hands were very powerful, they had limited manpower. There were less than 500 people, and they needed to guard the 4 directions. It was destined that the counterattack they could make was very limited. Fire 2 waves of grenades in a row. Beat back the enemies that are close to us. Captain Howling Blade had somehow arrived at Ba Dao River and started shouting. Then, a wave of grenades was thrown in all directions. Cries of agony were heard one after another. Many of the soldiers from the 3 provinces who wanted to approach them were killed. The situation was stabilized again. Sigh. A heavy punch fell from the sky. Seeing that they were charging fearlessly, the opportunity to defeat the enemy had appeared. However, it was indeed a pity that they had failed because of a wave of grenades. However, Wang Zhanjiang wasn't discouraged. Since they had the opportunity just now, he believed that they would have a second chance if they continued to charge. He continued to give orders. The entire army charged forward without stopping. The battle in the inner circle was in full swing. Outside the small courtyard, the sound of gunfire and cannons had attracted more and more civilians. The appearance of the civilians wasn't that sudden. After all, the same sound had been heard for 2 consecutive nights. Anyone who wasn't deaf could hear it. The difference was that although these people were worried for the first 2 nights, they didn't do anything. But now, the civilians were making a move. From all directions, more than 15,000 civilians rushed towards the small courtyard. General Cai Wenju, who was in charge of the security of the outer circle, didn't look nervous at all. Perhaps this was due to inertia. In front of the army, the civilians were just livestock that could be driven around at will. Men, set up the formation. Archers, get ready. If the commoners dare to come close, shoot them down. Cai Wenju, who was riding on his horse, said calmly. Compared to the civilians who didn't have much fighting power, he was much more fortunate than Wang Zhanjiang, who could die at any moment in the inner circle. Cai Wenju had a calm expression on his face, but if he knew that 1/10 of the 20,000 soldiers under him were cold vanguard warriors and thousands of new recruits had already been convinced by the cold vanguard warriors, he would not be able to remain so calm. As the saying goes, to catch bandits, first catch the ringleader. Cai Wenju didn't know that he had already become someone's target. Cheng Hu, the commander of the Cold Front Army's 1st Division and 1st Regiment, was currently hiding in the army, watching Cai Wenju's every move. Anyone who had been in the army knew that one was always the most powerful existence in an army. For example, in a company, if a company's 1st-grade officer died in battle, then the one to inherit their position would definitely be a platoon leader. Logically speaking, if the platoon-level officers all died in battle, the one who would inherit their positions would definitely be the platoon leader. This clearly showed the importance of this platoon leader. For Cheng Hu to be able to become the commander of an army's 1st Division and 1st Regiment, his ability was naturally not to be underestimated. Since he had his eyes on Cai Wenju, how could he escape from Cheng Hu's grasp when the enemy was in the open and Cai Wenju was in the dark? Attack! Seeing that the commoners were getting closer and closer, and that many of the soldiers from the 3 provinces had already started to knock their arrows, Cheng Hu, as the commander, shouted loudly. He drew his scimitar and charged towards Cai Wenju on his horse. With a shout, hundreds of cold vanguard warriors also drew their scimitars and charged towards Cai Wenju. They only had one target, General Cai Wenju on his horse. The formation suddenly became chaotic. Many of the soldiers from the 3 provinces didn't know what was going on. They only felt people charging past them, and if anyone dared to stop them, they would quickly be knocked to the ground and never be able to get up again. This sudden turn of events left many of the soldiers of the 3 provinces scratching their heads in confusion. Before they could figure out what was going on, Cai Wenju, who was riding on the horse, had his head chopped off. Blood sprayed everywhere. Cheng Hu's personal strength was naturally unquestionable. Just the number of cold vanguard warriors and officers trained by him numbered more than 1,000. Having fought with countless people, he had long trained himself to be invincible in close combat. Coupled with the fact that he was unprepared, it would be strange if Cai Wenju could escape. Without even having the time to react, the commander of the troops, Cai Wenju, was killed on his horse. When the other soldiers from the 3 provinces saw this scene, all of them turned pale with fright. More importantly, the person who killed the general was wearing the same uniform as them. This was the most frightening and inexplicable thing. Why did the soldiers dare to kill the general? If these people dared to kill the general, would they also dare to kill them? Put down your weapons and kneel on the ground. Otherwise, you will be killed without mercy. Waves of shouts came out one after another. More and more recruits with red cloth wrapped around their arms jumped out and shouted. The united front work done before finally played a decisive role at this moment. Cheng Hu's sudden attack and the active cooperation of his 4 battalion commanders, including Feng Zhan and Wang Jinlong, made the soldiers from the 3 provinces squat on the ground in confusion. Although they still didn't know what was going on, one thing was clear. If they didn't drop their weapons and squat on the ground now, they would die. This had been proven by the fact that their comrades had been killed for no reason just now. There were more and more civilians on the periphery, and the soldiers from the 3 provinces were getting closer and closer. Although there were nearly 100 spies from the Security Bureau encouraging everyone to act as the mainstay, when the soldiers from the 3 provinces were getting closer and closer, many civilians couldn't help but slow down. They were civilians and hadn't received any relevant military training. When facing regular soldiers with armor and swords, it would be a lie to say that they weren't nervous. But when they thought that if Bugnam of Gojoseon died in Yunnan Prefecture, the 5-star army would definitely take revenge. At that time, they would also be unable to escape death. Their confidence was strengthened a lot, and they didn't seem to be as scared as before. What's going on? Why isn't anyone shooting at us? Yeah, why do I see that many of these soldiers are squatting down? The distance was getting closer and closer. When they were less than 30 steps away, the civilians at the front finally saw the movements of the soldiers from the 3 provinces. The spies mixed in the crowd played a role at this time. Thinking of what the director said before, that someone would cooperate with them, how could they not know what was going on? Immediately, one by one, they shouted in the crowd, "The soldiers are mutinous. They are on the same side as us. Now, let's go with them and rescue Bugnam of Gojoseon." As soon as such shouts appeared, they rose and fell one after another without end. All the spies in the crowd also shouted in all directions, hoping to convey this fact to the ears of every civilian, so that they could move forward without worry. The fact that there were no arrows from afar was enough to explain everything. After knowing that the soldiers were like them and didn't want anything to happen to Bugnam of Gojoseon, the number of soldiers increased by a lot. They were no longer afraid, and each of them moved faster than before. There was a mutiny on the outside, and it wouldn't be long before it affected the inside. Under the attack from both sides, Wang Zhanjiang's fate was already sealed, and Yang Chendong's safety would naturally be guaranteed. It was at this time that Yang Chendong, to everyone's surprise, broke out from the east alone in a golden cloak. His body was like a fox, and he was as fast as a cheetah. This was the true portrayal of Yang Chendong's current situation. In the darkness, the golden cloak shone like a beacon. After he rushed out, he was locked on by many eyes. Golden cloak, that must be Bugnam of Gojoseon. Go after him. In the darkness, Mu Ang, who was paying close attention to everything, like a viper lurking in the dark, had a flash of excitement in his eyes. He naturally saw the intensity of the battle just now. When he saw how the Black Cavalry relied on the advanced firearms in their hands to repel the attacks of the 3 provincial armies again and again, he was anxious and uneasy. After observing the battlefield, Mu Ang came to the east. In his opinion, the defense here seemed to be weaker. If he had to launch an attack, he would definitely choose to attack here. Hiding in the east, he didn't know if the 3 provincial armies could break through the Black Cavalry's defense line if this continued. If they couldn't, once Yang Chendong walked out alive, who could restrain him? Where could they find such a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity? Yang Chendong must die. Otherwise, he would have to go and die. This was the military order he gave to his uncle, Ping Shi Wang Mu Bin, before he came. With the military order in front of him, Mu Ang was still thinking about whether to launch an attack in the chaos. The men he brought were men of sacrifice trained by the Mu family with great effort. In terms of skills, they were naturally not comparable to the ordinary soldiers of the 3 provincial armies. Even so, he was not 100% confident that he could bring 200 men of sacrifice to the Black Cavalry. While he was still struggling in his heart and unable to make a final decision, Yang Chendong rushed out. Especially when the other party deliberately stopped in the process of charging. With the help of the moon, they could see his face clearly. Needless to say, Mu Ang was excited. Chapter 1577. He thought that this mission would be very difficult to complete, and the 200 men he brought with him would be thrown here. He never thought that Yang Chendong would actually rush out. Could it be that the Black Cavalry's defensive line was no longer safe? It's just that this is not what Mu Ang should care about now. What he needs to do now is to catch up with Yang Chendong and kill him. Having seen the portrait of Yang Chendong countless times, Mu Ang believed that he would not recognize the wrong person. Therefore, after Yang Chendong, who was wearing a golden cloak, rushed out from the east and kept running away, Muong took him and 200 men under him like ghosts in the night and chased after Yang Chendong. As soon as Muong moved, in the same darkness, the 100 ninjas also moved. For Yang Chendong's appearance and figure, even if he turned into ashes, Bujishi could not forget it. So in just a face-to-face, Bujishi could be 100% sure that the person who escaped was Yang Chendong. Even so, how could he let go of this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity? Yang Chendong appeared, and he was still alone. His appearance also directly attracted the pursuit of 200 men of the Mu family and 100 ninjas. Besides, at this time, Yang Chendong, with the idea of being bold, rushed out from the protection of the Black Cavalry. The reason why he did this was that he wanted to lure the enemy into the trap, and secondly, doing this could also reduce the pressure on the Black Cavalry, so that he could go all out and fight without any scruples. It's just that when he really rushed out, Yang Chendong was not sure whether someone would chase after him or not. It wasn't until he met the soldiers of the 3 provinces who were charging at him from the outside, and used his body to quickly weave through them, that he heard the dense footsteps behind him. Only then did a relaxed smile appear on his face. With Yang Chendong's current skill, his hearing was naturally better than ordinary people. Just from the sound of those footsteps, he could feel that the strength of the people who came was definitely not comparable to the ordinary soldiers of the 3 provinces. From the orderly and light footsteps, Yang Chendong could feel that the other party's breathing was very stable. They should be the work of a well-trained master. Thinking that these people were masters, Yang Chendong couldn't help but rejoice in his actions. If it wasn't for this risk, the killers who waited for a long time and didn't have a chance to attack the small courtyard together with the soldiers of the 3 provinces. If so, the loss of the Black Cavalry would be inevitable. Come on, I hope you can keep up with my speed. After a smile that others couldn't see flashed across the corner of Yang Chendong's mouth, he stomped his feet on the ground and rushed forward again. With only 50% of his strength, Yang Chendong could keep a safe distance from the pursuers behind him. Yang Chendong led the way in front without any hurry. Behind him were the men of sacrifice led by Muong and the ninjas led by Chueisho. As the 2 sides chased and fled, the distance between them and the small courtyard was getting farther and farther. Keep an eye on him, don't let him run away. Muong was very excited at this time. When he spoke, he looked back, and then his eyes flashed with helplessness. Unlike Yang Chendong's skill, he could rush out of the encirclement of the 3 provinces without any injuries. When he led his men to break out of the encirclement, it took him some effort. The moment he collided with the soldiers of the 3 provinces, both sides were entangled for a short period of time. After sacrificing the lives of several men of sacrifice, he finally managed to kill his way out. This was because the soldiers of the 3 provinces were not prepared in the dark. Otherwise, Muong didn't dare to think about how many of the 200 men of sacrifice could escape alive. Now that several people have died, and all of this will fall on Yang Chendong's head, Muong's killing intent was even stronger at this time. Chueisho, who was 1 step behind them, was not any better. Just now, after a fierce battle, after losing the lives of several ninjas, they were able to rush out. Although they were reinforcements invited by Zhu Huihua, before their identity was announced, ordinary soldiers of the 3 provinces didn't know who they were. If they met on the battlefield, they were either comrades or enemies. Several ninjas died before they could catch up with the main character. Chueisho was also angry, but when he thought that he could finally catch Yang Chendong, his mood became excited again. He knew the importance of this battle. It will indicate whether the ninjas can be independent of Xianxia, and whether they have the opportunity to rebuild the small Japanese empire. And for this great goal, even if they use all their strength, even if they lose their lives, it is worth it. Both of them looked like they would not give up until they achieved their goal. The 2 teams followed Yang Chendong's footsteps closely and weaved through the southern cloud manor. Yang Chendong, who was walking in front, was undoubtedly the most relaxed person. If he wanted to, with his strength, he could easily get rid of the tail behind him, but he didn't do that. He wanted to see if there was a second force that wanted to take his life. In this way, one side fled, while the other chased for about half an hour. Even when Yang Chendong felt tired, he still didn't find any new enemies. He knew that the dark forces in Yunnan Mansion were only these. He looked at the direction and went to the Xing Wang Temple in the east of the city. Xing Wang Temple, in the Great Ming Dynasty at that time, almost every town had one. It represented a kind of sustenance for the people. As the Xing Wang Temple of Yunnan Mansion, it covered a large area. It was equivalent to the size of a courtyard, and it was protected by a courtyard wall. It had its own independent courtyard. This was the cemetery Yang Chendong prepared for the people chasing behind him, and it was also the place where Yang Chendong prepared a backup plan. Just now, he had passed by it twice. He believed that the people who had been lying in ambush must have made all kinds of preparations. It was time to close the net. When he came to the Xing Wang Temple again, Yang Chendong flashed and jumped in the wall. His whole person disappeared into the darkness like a ghost. Following behind him were Mu Ong and the others. Several men with good body skills also flew up, grabbed the courtyard wall and jumped in. Soon the door was opened from the inside, and more men rushed in from the door. Nearly 200 men rushed into the Xing Wang Temple with the fastest speed, which made Ishiki, who followed closely behind, couldn't help but stop. He only stopped for a few seconds, and then he rushed in with nearly 100 ninjas. "Who are you people?" As soon as they entered the courtyard, a group of men turned around and surrounded Ishiki and the others. The ninjas were not willing to be outdone, and they all held their ninja swords in their hands, ready to fight at any time. During the pursuit, Mu Ong knew that there was another group of pursuers behind him. However, he didn't know who these people were, so he didn't pay attention to them. After all, killing Yang Chendong was the most important task. But now, the two sides finally collided, and it was time for an explanation. "Don't be nervous, we are also looking for Bugnam of Gojoseon to take his life." Ishiki stepped forward and looked at Mu Ong, who was nervous. This wasn't because Ishiki was afraid of Mu Ong. In this dark night, although he didn't have the number of people, he was confident that he could win. It's just that he didn't forget that Yang Chendong was his target, and he didn't want to complicate things before that. How could Mu Ong not think the same way? Although he didn't know the strength of his opponents, he didn't see them coming. However, when they saw him, they did not immediately attack him. This proved everything. They weren't Yang Chendong's subordinates, and with this, he won't be an enemy before completing the mission. Well, I will believe you for the time being. Now Yang Chendong is in this Xing Wang Temple, let's look for him carefully. Mu Ong stopped his men from attacking and turned around to go inside the Xing Wang Temple. He had already arranged people to guard outside the temple. If Yang Chendong wanted to escape, he wouldn't be able to escape from his eyes. The two groups of people were divided into several teams, and they began to slowly move forward. They went to one temple after another, and it seemed like they were going to turn this place upside down to find Yang Chendong. In the dark, Yang Chendong's eyes had already been put on the most advanced night vision goggles, and he was watching Mu Ong and Ishiki slowly approaching him. At this moment, Yang Chendong's eyes were filled with an inexhaustible anger, all because he saw Ishiki. Although the other party was dressed in black at this time, and there was a black mask on his face, but just like the other party could easily recognize him, he also recognized the other party. Ishiki is dead. He died in the assassination of Mandula too. This is a well-known thing in Xianxia. But no one would have thought that in order to deter the world, Manto Ratu hung all the assassins on the wooden pole to warn the world. Because of this action, the secret agents of the Security Bureau carefully examined the corpses, but they didn't find the leader of the ninja clan, Kuroshio Shinobi. When this information was reported to Yang Chendong, he was a little more vigilant. For this reason, he has taken some precautions, but at that time, Yang Chendong was still optimistic that Ishiki might have been burned, or he might have escaped with serious injuries and died. After all, he is a special ninja, and his strength is not comparable to ordinary people. This was just a kind of hope. However, when Chue Shi appeared in the Xing Wang Temple, Yang Chendong knew that he had been too optimistic. This person is not dead, and he wants to kill him. Thinking that if he didn't save him, Ishiki would have died, and there would be no ninja today. And it was his own kindness that led to all of this. The anger in his heart couldn't be extinguished. Yang Chendong hates betrayal, especially after betrayal, they want to harm him. With this, there will be no good result for Ishiki today. Chapter 1578. Get ready to do it. In the end, Yang Chendong shook his head. He knew that those were just memories. Now, it was time to make up his mind to eradicate all of this. Yang Chendong, who seemed to have made some kind of decision, walked out of the darkness wearing a golden robe. As soon as he appeared, the death warriors of the Mu family and the Japanese ninjas who were searching for him couldn't help but exclaim, and then everyone quickly rushed forward and surrounded him. With the help of the torch in his hand, the entire courtyard of the Xing Wang temple was illuminated, and Yang Chendong's face also appeared in everyone's eyes. When he saw that it was indeed Yang Chendong, Mu Ong was overjoyed. Previously, he had been worried that the person chasing him was fake and that he would fall for a trick to lure the tiger away from the mountain. But now, he could let go of his worries. On the other side, Blowing Stone, who was wearing a night suit, frowned. The person who came is Yang Chendong, and he is confident that he won't be wrong. But because of this, he couldn't help but mutter in his heart, the other party shouldn't have come out. 1 against 300, and such elite 300 people, even if they were made of iron, they wouldn't be their opponents. But why did he know that? Why did he come out? Thinking of Yang Chendong's various means before, especially the last time when Ivan's sneak attack failed, and even the 30,000 cavalry led by Yeshen were destroyed, Blowing Stone's face suddenly became ugly. Could it be that this is a trap set by Yang Chendong? When he thought of Yang Chendong's past, for some reason, Blowing Stone had a feeling of panic. Although he glanced around and didn't find anything wrong, he was still very nervous at the moment. Unlike Yang Chendong's men, Mu Ong at this moment appeared in front of Yang Chendong as a winner. "Oh, this should be King Wunan of Damyang. I'm Mu Ong of the Mu family. I've been waiting for a long time." The Mu family of Shiping King? Yang Chendong wasn't surprised when he heard this. He just repeated it and chuckled. Then, he didn't pay any more attention to the other party. Instead, he looked at the area under the rock. "What? Friend, are you not going to introduce yourself? Even if you want my life, you should at least let me know who you are, right?" Yang Chendong was so calm that people who didn't know would think that this was his home ground. So when they heard this, many of the Mu family's death warriors and ninjas showed resentment on their faces. As ordinary ninjas, although they know that they once worked for Yang Xie, they don't know that everything they need for training, such as food, clothing, shelter, transportation, etc., was provided by Yang Chendong. They thought that the upper echelons had no choice but to lower their heads and submit to others in order to survive. In fact, several special ninjas like Kurosawa also said this to the people below. This caused everyone to look at Yang Chendong without the slightest bit of gratitude, only murderous intent and anger. But Chuisho is different from ordinary people. He knows everything. When he saw Yang Chendong's eyes looking at him, he knew that the other party already knows his identity, otherwise, he wouldn't question him in such a tone. When he thought about how he relied on Yang Chendong to develop and even lived until now, and it was because of Yang Chendong's help, he felt short of breath. Facing this question, he naturally didn't know how to answer. Chuisho didn't speak immediately, which caused Yang Chendong to laugh. "What's wrong? Could it be that all of you are mute? Or are you too ashamed to say your name and identity?" Yang Chendong deliberately said these words in Japanese. This is also his way of telling Chuisho that this king has already recognized his identity, and there is no point in hiding it anymore. Baka! What is he talking about? Is he looking down on us ninjas? At this time, those ninjas have already exploded. Their dignity will never allow others to judge them like this. But they also know the importance of respect. At this moment, after most of the ninjas vented their dissatisfaction, they still looked at Chuisho. They want him to speak for them. He even spoke in Japanese. Chuisho knew that his identity has already been exposed. It's just that at this moment he was no longer afraid. Since he made such a choice, he must bear the consequences. So before he came, he was prepared to die, although he didn't think that this trip would be dangerous. After taking a deep breath and calming down, Chuisho finally spoke. "Bugnam of Gojoseon, long time no see. I am a special ninja of the Japanese Empire, Chuisho." It turned out to be a ninja. Mu Ong, who saw everything from the side, couldn't help but be surprised. But soon this surprise was suppressed in the bottom of his heart, This time, he didn't want to be enemies with ninjas, but to kill Yang Chendong. As long as he can complete this task, it's just a small ninja whose country has been destroyed, he really doesn't put him in his eyes. You finally dare to admit your identity? But why don't you call yourself a servant? And what Japanese empire did you say? Haha, wasn't it destroyed a long time ago? Now it's just a province of Xianxia. Yang Chendong waited for Chuisho to admit his identity, then he couldn't help but laugh. His words were full of sarcasm and contempt. In the past, these ninjas under the rock claimed to be slaves in front of Yang Chendong, and even if he wanted, these people claimed to be lackeys. But now, these small titles proved their ambition. In the face of these sarcastic words, the other ninjas who understood Chinese naturally couldn't stand it. They all looked at Chuisho angrily. Chuisho wasn't much better. If it was just him and Yang Chendong here, he would just listen to some of these words. But now there are so many ninjas here, he absolutely won't allow anyone to question and disrespect him. So at this moment he suddenly shouted back. Bugnam of Gojoseon, the past is the past, please speak with dignity. Dignity, bah. Yang Chendong opened his mouth and spat. A group of people who are willing to be dogs in order to survive? You want others to respect you, you think too highly of yourselves. Let me tell you, a dog is a dog, even if it's wearing clothes, it's just a pet called by the master. In the face of a master who gives you food and drinks, you have to learn to wag your tail and beg, not to be treated with equal respect like a human, because you don't deserve it. After saying these words, it didn't seem to be enough. Yang Chendong continued to say. If it wasn't for this king, you would already be dead. How could you have your current scale? Without this king's money, how could you recruit people and train them wholeheartedly? Do you really think you can deny everything just because you've eaten everything? Facing Yang Chendong's questioning, Chuisho opened his mouth several times to say something, but in the end, he didn't say anything. Yang Chendong was right. If it wasn't for his pity and help, they would have already been killed by the samurai of the Japanese Empire. They wouldn't have been able to survive until now, let alone develop and grow stronger. They were once their benefactors, but now they don't want to repay him, they want to kill their master. What they did was indeed a bit too much. After venting for a while, Yang Chendong's mood seemed to be better. He opened his mouth and said, "All right, let the past go with the wind. Since you have chosen to be enemies with this king, then there's no meaning in saying those things. Now that you have found this king and want to kill this king, can you tell me who ordered you to do this? Oh, don't say no if you want to train ninjas. Without enough money, it's impossible. Don't try to fool this king." With a change of topic, Yang Chendong placed the question on the person behind the scenes. This was also the answer that Yang Chendong desperately wanted to know. Wasn't the reason why he took such a risk on this trip for this answer, to find out who the traitor was? Yang Chendong didn't mention the past, he just wanted to know who ordered them to do it. This request was already very low. Before a prisoner died, they were allowed to eat a full meal, not to mention Yang Chendong, who was their benefactor. But he just wanted to know who was behind the scenes. This was not too much. If Chuishiki knew the answer, he would tell Yang Chendong. But unfortunately he really didn't know. Chuishiki shook his head. Bugnam of Gojoseon, it's not that Chuishiki doesn't want to tell you, I really don't know, I only know to listen to Emogue's orders. Okay? Who is he? Although Yang Chendong was somewhat dissatisfied with this answer, he also knew that Chuishiki really didn't know, otherwise, he wouldn't refuse to answer this question. I don't know who he is, I just know everything, I just listen to him. By the way, he should be in the palace of the 3 provinces now, beside the 3 provincial kings. It's a pity, I'm afraid that Bugnam of Gojoseon will never see him again. Chuishiki said while shaking his head, as if he was going to die here today. He was destined to not know the result. Emogue, right? I'll remember this name. Yang Chendong nodded heavily, as if he attached great importance to this name. Seeing that Yang Chendong was still hesitating about this matter, seeing that Chuishiki seemed to have answered his question, and seeing that it was getting late, Muong laughed loudly. Well, Bugnam of Gojoseon, you should know everything you need to know, now you shouldn't have any last wishes, it's time to go on the road. Go on the road? With just you? You're just a small child of the Mu family. Do you know that I'm Bugnam of Gojoseon, the emperor of the Great Ming Dynasty, recognized by the emperor of the Great Ming Dynasty? Bai Ming and the emperor of the southern Ming dynasty. Do you know that you're offending your superiors by doing this to me? Seeing that Chuishiki couldn't ask any more questions, Yang Chendong turned his gaze to Mu Ong. Chapter 1579. Mu Ong had never experienced Yang Chendong's methods. He had only heard about them, so Mu Ong was not afraid of him. Seeing that Yang Chendong still wanted to use his position to oppress others, Mu Ong could not help but burst into laughter. Haha, Bugnam of Gojosian? The emperor personally conferred the title? Don't you think it's ridiculous to say this? Don't you know that all this is because you were forced to do so? You're just a courtier. Instead of thanking the emperor for his kindness, you only want to rebel and become the emperor. Now you still have the face to talk about these principles. Don't you feel ashamed? Mu Ang's scolding attracted a burst of cheers from the men of sacrifice around him. Although they had not made a move yet, it was obvious that their young master Mu was much better than the special ninja of the Japanese Empire. This was something they should be proud of. Yang Chendong listened to all this carefully, and there was no trace of unhappiness on his face. This was because he knew that Mu Ong wasn't the only one who thought this way. Most of the officials of the Great Ming Dynasty were also thinking this way. This was everyone's intuition about him. He really needed to understand it. It was a pity that Mu Ang's eloquence was only SOSO. After saying this, he shut up. Perhaps he was disappointed that he did not see Yang Chendong flying into a rage, so he lost interest. Why don't you continue? Yang Chendong, on the other hand, didn't seem to have heard enough and asked such a question. This really angered Mu Ong. He had never seen such a thick-skinned person. For a moment, he did not know what to say. He simply did not answer. Instead, he clenched the long sword in his hand and shouted, "What's there to say to a dying man?" Yang Chendong nodded as if he understood, but then shook his head. "I gave you a chance to vent your dissatisfaction. If you don't want to say it, then there's really no chance. However, I have to warn you that your actions will bring disaster to the entire Mu family and Shiping King. I hope you won't regret it when you meet in the netherworld." Regret? You should be the one regretting it. At the very least, you should die before us. Do it. Mu Ong didn't want to say anything else. Perhaps because he couldn't see Yang Chendong's fear, Mu Ong felt that it was unnecessary to say anything. It would be better to take him down and cut him into 1,000 pieces. That's right, we should do it. Do it. As Mu Ang's voice fell, Yang Chendong actually nodded in agreement, and then said the same thing. Then, the sound of a dying person wailing could be heard. This voice made Mu Ong and Bao Shi, who were about to make a move, freeze. They couldn't help but stop moving forward. Bang! The closed door of the temple behind them was suddenly knocked open from the outside. Then a group of black figures jumped in and blocked the direction of the door. Not only that, at the same time, on the courtyard wall, a group of men in black rushed out from behind Yang Chendong. As soon as they appeared, they surrounded Mu Ong and Bao Shi. The sudden change shocked Mu Ong and Chuishida. Their expressions were no longer as relaxed as before. The men of sacrifice sent by the Mu family were all very strong. If they were fighting on the battlefield, any one of them would not be afraid of 3 to 5 people. But those shouts just now were so quick that they almost didn't hear any sound of resistance. They were killed one after another. From this point of view, doesn't it mean that this person's skills were more powerful than theirs? The stronger the enemy, the more dangerous their situation would be. It would be strange if they didn't have a good expression. The only thing worth rejoicing over was that although it seemed like they were surrounded, it was clear that not many people had come. There were only a little over 100 people, which was not even half of their number. It seemed that with the advantage of numbers, they still had a fighting chance. Seemingly at the same time, Mu Ong and Blowing Stone's eyes met. Then, almost at the same time, they opened their mouths and said the word kill. They were fast, but some people were faster than them. Those men in black who suddenly appeared, they didn't know when they had the 95 style gun in their hands. Just when those men of sacrifice and ninjas were about to move, a black muzzle was pointed at them, and then there was a burst of fierce gunshots. The bullets flashed in the dark night, and ninjas and men of sacrifice who wanted to rush forward were shot down one by one. Firearms? When they saw the men in black took out these things, whether it was Mu Ang or Bao Shi, their face changed. A strong sense of crisis also pressed down on them, making their originally confident faces lose their confidence. Retreat. Almost one after the other, Bao Shi and Mu Ang gave the order. In their view, although they had the advantage in numbers, in the face of powerful firearms, it was too difficult to win. In that case, it was better to escape first. Anyway, Yang Chendong was still in Yunnan Mansion, so they didn't have to worry about not finding an opportunity to kill him. It's just that at this time, they still wanted to retreat, but it was not so easy. A smoke bomb was thrown at them, the strong smoke exuded a nauseating smell, and their eyes couldn't help but shed tears of pain. In a short time, most people were hit and lost the ability to resist. Throw the flash bomb. Another voice came out, followed by a series of hand grenades that could blind people's eyes. They were thrown in the courtyard, making those men of sacrifice who wanted to escape in the dark, especially the ninjas, have no choice but to stop. Forget about the men of sacrifice. Their advantage was that they were not afraid of death. When their strength was obviously inferior, they were just like straws that could be harvested at any time. Ninjas were different. What they were good at was hiding, or sneaking, or running away with the help of various means. Whether it was using the surrounding environment or the reflection and refraction of light. In short, when it came to escaping, few people dared to say that they were the best. Not to mention in the originally dark environment, as long as they couldn't be killed in the first place, once they escaped, it would be extremely difficult to catch them. It was precisely because they knew and understood this that those flash bombs were thrown out. When a strong light suddenly came out and met the eyes of those ninjas, at that moment, they felt that there was a vast expanse of white in front of them. At this moment, they completely lost their direction, let alone escape. When the flash bombs appeared, the men in black with special goggles moved. They had been trained for this for a long time, and with the protection of the goggles, the flash bomb's damage to them has been minimized. One side couldn't see anything, and the other side's vision was normal, so it was easy to imagine what would happen. The sound of gunshots came out, hitting the legs of the men of sacrifice or ninjas one after another. Soon, the Xingwang temple was dyed red with blood, and a burst of fishy smell also assailed their nostrils, making them want to vomit. Those assassins who first experienced the smoke bombs, then the flash bombs, and then the smell of blood finally couldn't stand it anymore. They began to bend down, lowered their heads, and vomited. But even if they had lost the power to resist in a short time, the gunshots still didn't stop. One by one, their legs were penetrated by bullets, and blood flowed out. One by one, they couldn't stand still and fell to the ground. In a short time, the assassins who wanted to resist and break out of the encirclement stopped moving. They fell to the ground one by one, wailing and screaming. At the same time, their bodies were twitching. They didn't know if it was because of the gunshot wounds or because of the smell in their noses. They kept twisting their bodies in pain. Control them all. Seeing that the dust had settled, the group of black-clothed men stopped. One by one, they lit up their torches and began to walk towards the injured assassins on the ground. Fight them to the death. When a black-clothed man came to the side of a death warrior, a sudden shout resounded. Then, a figure endured the pain from his legs and suddenly pounced on him like a ferocious tiger coming down from the mountain. His momentum was extraordinary. "You're courting death." The man in black with a torch in his right hand seemed to have expected this scene to happen. He just moved his body to the side and dodged the tiger's attack. Then, when the assassin's figure missed, a torch hit the assassin's back. Under the powerful force, the assassin spat out another mouthful of blood. This time, he completely fainted. This scene continued to happen. Men of sacrifice were men of sacrifice. They kept fighting back. Although they had lost the support of their legs, they still fought back. However, those men in black all seemed to have unique skills. Not only were none of them injured, but they all used a single move to subdue the killers who were still unwilling to give up. Once again, they knocked them unconscious on the ground. Among them, the most obvious one was the man in black who fought against Mu Ang. Mu Ang was allowed to lead the team. Needless to say, his skills were excellent. Therefore, although his legs were penetrated by bullets just now, he did not give up the last chance. When he endured the pain in his legs, he jumped up and rushed toward the man in black. He was full of confidence that his sneak attack would succeed. Although he did this, he still could not avoid the result of death. But it was probably the best result to be able to drag one of them down with him before he died. Although it was said that it would be faster if it was late, when he really attacked, Muong was disappointed again. The moment he flew up, he felt that something was wrong. Then he found that in the face of his absolute counterattack, his opponent did not panic. He even saw the disdain in his opponent's eyes under the moonlight. Then, facing his fierce attack, his opponent did not dodge. On the contrary, his opponent met his attack head-on with his left fist without a torch. Chapter 1580. Logically speaking, it was a good thing that the opponent didn't dodge. But for some reason, Muong had a bad feeling in his heart. Soon, his feeling became reality. The fist collided with his body, and then he felt his whole body fall apart as if he was electrocuted. Then, he fell to the ground and fainted. But before he fainted, Muong vaguely saw a big foot stepping on his head. He didn't know what would happen next, nor did he have time to think about it, because he had already closed his eyes in pain. Okay, violent ape, this person's identity is important, we can't let him die now. A shout rang out behind him. Only then did the black-clothed man stop his foot that was about to land. Then, he fiercely stomped to the side, forcefully creating a shallow pit in the ground. Only then did he continue to walk forward, completing his mission of investigating the enemy. Sixth young master, violent ape is like this. He was born with great strength and a bad temper, but fortunately he didn't ruin anything. Silver Hand wiped the sweat on his forehead and said nervously to Yang Chendong, "It's okay, as long as he doesn't die. Even if he does die, it's okay." Yang Chendong shrugged indifferently. This time, his backup plan was the soldiers of the Wolf Fang Special Forces. Over the years, the development of the Wolf Fang Special Forces wasn't fast. It could even be described as slow, but their strength was really terrifying. They spent most of their time on training, and their strength was terrifying. If it was just a one-on-one, even the Black Cavalry wouldn't be their opponent. It was precisely because of the high intensity of training that they were very strict when recruiting people, so the development speed wasn't fast. But their overall combat strength was really tyrannical. This time, Yang Chendong gave them an early order to hide in Yunnan Manor and wait for orders. Yang Chendong had a large warehouse. But he wasn't a reckless person. In order to be foolproof, he had double insurance before entering the city. For example, there was the Cold Front 1st Army's 1st Division's 1st Regiment lurking in the 3 Provincial Armies recruit camp, and there were nearly 300 Wolf Fang Special Forces members. Although there weren't many of them in total, they were the most powerful of them all. Since they were going to turn the enemy's stomach upside down, they would naturally choose quality over quantity. This time, there were a total of 130 Special Forces members who appeared at the Xingwang Temple. Each of them could fight against 10 or even dozens of people. They were well prepared and equipped with the most advanced firearms. It was only 300 assassins, and they could easily wipe them out. If it wasn't for the fact that he had to keep some of them alive to interrogate them, he would have finished off all of them with just one round of gunfire. Then again, even Muong's counterattack was easily blocked. What was the use of the others struggling? It was as if Blowstone had also launched a counterattack. His opponent was Steel Leg. Unable to use the ninja's concealment jutsu, in just 3 rounds, he was kicked in the right arm. The bones in his arm were shattered, and he fainted. Under the encirclement of 130 Wolf Fang members, no one who resisted had a good ending. Those who underestimated the enemy were seriously injured and fainted. Those who were seriously injured were directly killed. It was a clean and quick death. Yang Chendong stopped paying attention to what was happening on the battlefield after he saw the members of Wolf Fang attacking so cleanly and efficiently. Since the people who should be lured out had been lured out, there was no need for him to hide any strength. It was also time to counterattack. Silverhand, where is your captain? Reporting to the 6th young master, the captain is leading people to the periphery of the 3 provinces' king's mansion. He is just waiting for the order to enter the mansion to take the people. Silverhand was arranged to cooperate with Yang Chendong to eliminate the assassins because he was rational in doing things. But in the Wolf Fang Special Forces, the real big brother was still the Captain Taihu. Okay, I will take 20 people away. The rest will be left to you. Clean up this place. When they wake up, interrogate them one by one. I want to know all the secrets in their hearts. Yang Chendong patted Silverhand's shoulder and said so. Please rest assured, 6th young master, I promise to complete the task. This slap made Silverhand extremely excited. He even noticed that the other team members were looking at him with envy. This was Yang Chendong, the soul of Xianxia, the founder of the 5-Star Army and also the founder of the Wolf Fang Special Forces. It could be said that everyone's current achievements were all thanks to Yang Chendong. A person who was like a god in their eyes actually patted him on the shoulder. How could his comrades not be envious? Yang Chendong didn't think so much. Instead, he had already left the Xing Wang Temple under the protection of 20 members of the Special Forces and went straight to the 3 Provinces King's Mansion. At the 3 Provinces King's Mansion, the atmosphere was a little tense at the moment. The battlefield in the small courtyard couldn't be taken down for a long time. The people in the city began to join in. When the mutiny outside, General Kai Wenju was killed and so on were reported to Zhu Huituan. His face was already very ugly. He didn't expect things to turn out like this. Men, immediately take this king's tiger tally and mobilize the troops. Invite General Luo Guan, Rajiv, Azad, and Hak from the Mengding Mansion to the Yunnan Mansion. No matter what, we must kill Yang Chendong. Go quickly. Zhu Huituan's voice was no longer as calm as it used to be. He couldn't help but be anxious. Once Yang Chendong escaped this time, he would be at a disadvantage righteously. In this way, the people of the 3 provinces who knew the truth would no longer believe him. Once they stood on Yang Chendong's side, how could he make a comeback? He wasn't afraid of the people, but an organized group of people was terrifying. Even if these people couldn't be used by him, they couldn't be used by Yang Chendong. But now, it seemed that he had underestimated the commoners' strength. To think that they had gathered an army of over 10,000 commoners right under his nose. What kind of means did they have to use to achieve this? Thinking of this, Zhu Huihua felt his scalp tingle. He felt as if a huge mountain was pressing down on him, making it hard for him to breathe. The best way to solve all of this was to kill Yang Chendong. Once this person was gone, the people would lose their nuclear core force and it would be much easier to deal with them. In the end, Yang Chendong had to die. That's right. Inform Wu Yingtu to immediately enter the city and cooperate with General Meng Ning to take over the city's defense. Once the 5-Star Army appears outside the city, we must defend the city and wait for reinforcements. After thinking about it, Zhu Huituan decided that this Miao King would come in handy. Zhu Huituan didn't completely believe in the Miao people. Therefore, on the surface, it seemed like he put Wu Yingtu in an important position, but he didn't allow the Miao army to enter the city. He only allowed them to set up camp outside the city. But now, seeing that the situation in the city was getting out of control, he thought of the 10,000 Miao soldiers and decided to put them in an important position. After giving out a few orders, Zhu Huituan sat back on the throne and his face looked much better. Next, he waited for news and battle reports from various parties. At the same time, he was also looking forward to the possibility that Wang Zhanjiang could kill Yang Chendong. Zhu Huituan didn't know that Yang Chendong had already left the courtyard in the dark. Not only that, but the 2 assassin teams that were most likely to threaten his safety were also eliminated. However, this wasn't the worst. The worst thing was that his mansion was surrounded. Even the slightest movement here couldn't escape the surveillance of the Langya Special Force led by Taihu. Just like the few messengers he sent out, it seemed like they had left the mansion and were safe. However, as soon as they walked into the nearby streets, they would be immediately intercepted and killed. It was still okay if they put down their weapons and surrendered, they could still live. However, anyone who resisted would be killed without mercy. In other words, all the orders in the mansion were only to enter and not to leave. After Yang Chendong arrived outside the mansion, the news couldn't even enter because there was no need to hide anything. They could directly lay their cards on the table. The sixth young master, Yang Chendong's appearance made Tai Hu and the others excited. Their eyes were filled with admiration. Although Tai Hu was the captain of the Langya Special Force and looked majestic, they were originally a special force that was independent of the five-star army. In other words, their actions were not under the jurisdiction of the five-star army. They didn't need to report their whereabouts. They were very mysterious and powerful. However, this was only in front of ordinary people. In front of Yang Chendong, these so-called arrogants could be removed one by one. It was because of Yang Chendong that the Langya Special Force had everything. It was also because of Yang Chendong's support that the Langya Special Force could be treated like this. Therefore, when facing the real founder of the Langya Special Force, Tai Hu and the others only had respect and obedience in their eyes. Well done. Yang Chendong had always been a person who was not stingy with his praise. When he walked to Tai Hu's side, his right hand naturally fell on his shoulder and gently patted him. Then, he asked about the situation in the mansion. Reporting to the sixth young master, there are a total of 3 doors in the mansion: the main door, the back door, and the side door. I have arranged people to watch over these 3 doors. I guarantee that when they come out, they will be killed. All their connections with the outside world have been cut off. Tai Hu straightened his body and made a simple report of the situation. Very good. Yang Chendong nodded with satisfaction after listening. How is the situation in the mansion? If we rush in now, how confident are we in controlling this place? Reporting to the sixth young master, Skinny Monkey has already gone in just now. The situation inside is basically clear. There are about 400 bodyguards of Zhu Huihua in the mansion. There are also more than 100 servants in the mansion. They don't have much fighting power. Therefore, as long as the sixth young master gives the order, we have absolute confidence in controlling this place. However, there may be some movements. After all, no one knows if Zhu Huihua has other means of rescue. When Tai Hu said this, he didn't look very confident. Chapter 1581. To be able to become the king of 3 provinces, it was normal for him to have some tricks up his sleeve. However, if he was not wrong, he would only release smoke to warn others of the danger. However, since Yang Chendong had decided to make a move, he was naturally not afraid of others knowing. Moreover, Chushi had already said that there should be a person called Mo Gui in the palace. He was the most troublesome existence because he knew nothing about this person. He did not know if this person had any other tricks up his sleeve. Whatever, the city is already in chaos. Now that the citizens have joined the war, we can't wait any longer. Otherwise, we will lose our strength. Let's do it this way. Tell everyone to get ready. We will attack in 10 minutes. We must finish the battle in the shortest time possible. As for whether there will be any reinforcements, we don't have to worry about that. With the current situation, I want to see who will come to save the king of 3 provinces. Yang Chendong made his final decision. He had 500 black cavalry soldiers to defend a few small courtyards. Now that the palace was so big, he had more than 100 Wolf Fang Special Force soldiers. He was more confident in facing any unexpected situation. One must know that there was everything in the warehouse. At worst, he could take out a small portion of the weapons in the warehouse and it would be enough to solve any problems. Not to mention, once Zhu Huichun was taken down, the people of the 3 provinces would be in danger. Who would think that they would come to save him? Since Yang Chendong had said so, Tai Hu naturally did not have any doubts. After saluting, he immediately went to make arrangements. After the most elite Wolf Fang took action, they had already formulated 3 battle plans in just 10 minutes. This was to ensure that once an unknown situation occurred, they would be able to guarantee that they could immediately change the plan to solve the problem. Sixth young master. When Tai Hu came in front of Yang Chendong again, his face was full of confidence. Let's do it. Yang Chendong of course knew that this was already prepared. He nodded his head. Let's do it. Tai Hu immediately turned around. Even though the sun had not risen yet, when he uttered those 2 words, hundreds of black shadows could be seen moving in different directions. They were advancing towards the prince mansions of the 3 provinces from 3 different directions. The battle outside was in full swing. Although the atmosphere in the 3 provincial palaces was a little tense, no one thought that there would be danger here. After all, the Southern Cloud Manor was still in the hands of their king. Therefore, ordinary people were still doing what they were supposed to do. Many of the guards were still sleeping and resting. Only a portion of the guards were patrolling the mansion, but they were just walking around. When the members of the special forces suddenly appeared like ghosts, many of the guards fell to the ground before they could react to what had happened. Most of them had a fatal wound on their bodies. One of the weapons that the special forces members were most used to using was the 3-pronged bayonet. This type of weapon was already banned in the future. Its lethality was too great. Once one was injured by it, one would basically die from excessive bleeding. Scheming against the unsuspecting. With the strong attacking the weak, the patrolling guards didn't even have time to react before a third of them died. At this moment, someone finally reacted and began to shout loudly to warn the others. However, shouting at this moment wouldn't affect the overall situation. Even if the guards who were already resting woke up and took out their swords, they would only be able to hold on for a little longer. Not good, not good. A guard rushed into the main hall of the prince mansion and knelt down in front of the prince of the 3 provinces, Zhu Huichen. What's going on? Why are you so flustered? Zhu Huichen was unhappy. On the other hand, Qin Tian, who was standing at the side waiting for news, had an extremely ugly expression. This was because he could vaguely hear the battle cries and it didn't seem to be far away. This made his scalp tingle. Reporting to your majesty, someone suddenly launched an attack on the prince mansion. The guards, what's wrong with the guards? Zhu Huichen walked forward impatiently and grabbed the guard's collar as he asked anxiously. The guards can't hold on anymore. What? Hearing this, Zhu Huichen couldn't help but let go of his right hand and involuntarily took a few steps back until he came to Qin Tian's side. After being supported by Qin Tian, he stopped. However, his face was pale and it was obvious that he was frightened. Even Qin Tian, who was behind him, wasn't any better. This was because he didn't expect that someone would have designs on the prince mansion at this time and harm the prince mansion. However, intuitively, he still didn't think that it was Yang Chendong's doing. This was Yunnan Manor and the other party was surrounded in the small courtyard. Logically speaking, the other party should be unable to protect himself. Why would they come to find trouble with him? How would Qin Tian know that Yang Chendong's personal strength was strong? Under the dark sky, with his master-level movement technique, unless someone was watching him, it wouldn't be difficult for him to break out of the encirclement. Qin Tian didn't think that it was Yang Chendong's doing. He looked at the guard and asked, "Do you know who is coming? How many people are there?" "I don't know. Those people are too strong. Our guards aren't their opponents at all. We only held on for a while because of our advantage in numbers. However, now that we don't have the advantage in numbers, we can't hold on any longer. Your Majesty, please think of a way." The guard who reported the news shook his head. Under the dark sky, how could he have the time to observe those things? He was only here to report the news. On the other hand, Zhu Huichen was worthy of being the king of 3 provinces. He still had some courage. The panic just now was only because of the sudden incident. Now that he knew the situation outside, he immediately said, Go and set a fire. Inform the people outside that the prince mansion is in danger." The guard responded and turned to leave. Zhu Huichen, who was left behind, grabbed Qin Tian's arm and went straight to the inner courtyard. A cunning rabbit has 3 burrows. Zhu Huichen killed his elder brother and younger brother. He also offended the southern Ming dynasty and Bugnam of Gojoseon. Under such circumstances, how could he not have a backup plan? For example, there was a secret basement in the prince mansion. The people who built the basement had been killed by him. Now, as long as he hid there, it would be difficult to be discovered. Zhu Huichen pulled Qin Tian and didn't take anyone else with him. He didn't even care about his family members. He quietly disappeared from the prince mansion and hid in his secret room. As the host, Zhu Huichen was prepared. However, as a guest, Emogui didn't have such conditions. When he learned that someone had killed their way into the prince mansion, he let out a long sigh. Then he went to the transmitter and started to send a message. This was the last telegram that Emogure could send. He had already thought of the content. However, he had been hoping that he wouldn't need to use the content in his life. But now, even the Prince Mansion of 3 provinces was about to be attacked. He knew that it was time. This was a telegram of desperation. Emogure sent the message that someone had killed their way into the Prince Mansion and that he would be killed soon. He also reported that Zhu Huichen was a good-for-nothing who was indecisive. That was why he had ruined the good situation. It was a mistake to ally with such a person. Yes, Emogure thought that Yang Chendong was going to die. There were only 500 people. So what if they were powerful? If Zhu Huichio came up to kill, he would directly send all the 50,000 troops in the city. Even if the other party had firearms, under the absolute advantage of numbers, he would be able to break through the defense line and kill Yang Chendong. However, the stupid Zhu Huichen chose to capture Yang Chendong alive. As a result, he lost the initiative. When Emogure wanted to change his mind, it was too late. After that, Emogure expressed his gratitude to Uncle Ing for saving his life. He said that it was time for him to repay Uncle Ing for saving his life. He would die to repay Uncle Ying's kindness. After sending the telegram, Emogure dismantled the radio station and buried it where he had dug the hole. He didn't want people to know that there was a radio station here, because it would make people think of Uncle Ing behind him and threaten the safety of some people. When he was done, the battle cries outside the door were getting closer and closer. Emogure smiled bitterly and took out a pill from his sleeve. He swallowed it without hesitation and closed his mouth. Clang! The door was pushed open and 2 special forces rushed in. It wasn't difficult for Langya to take down the entire Prince Mansion. In the end, all the guards in the mansion were killed. The few who surrendered survived. Unfortunately, they didn't find Zhu Huichen. Even Chen Tian, the civil official, was nowhere to be found. Bring Zhu Changjiu here. Yang Chendong called the steward of the prince's mansion, who had been instigated by Yang San, after failing to find anyone and even searching twice carefully, came to no avail. Zhu Changjiu came to Yang Chendong, trembling with fear. After knowing the identity of the person who came, he knelt on the ground and shouted, "Long live Bugnam of Gojoseon." Well, don't be afraid. You're one of us. We won't make things difficult for you. When we're done here, you can go to Xianxia and reunite with your sister. You're a meritorious official, so you'll be rewarded accordingly. After comforting him, Yang Chendong asked if there was a secret passage or a basement in the mansion. Although Zhu Changjiu had been with Zhu Huichen for many years, he didn't know much about it. He shook his head and said, "Your Majesty, I really don't know about it." Yang Chendong was not surprised by this answer. After all, Zhu Huihua had even abandoned his wife and child. In other words, even his family members did not know the location of the secret passage, let alone a steward of the residence. Well, you should know a man called Emogure, right? Oh yes, the mysterious man you reported to Director Yang San. You're tuning in to the Wang Lin's Journey YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.